And welcome to the Evidence Reasons Academy. I'm Salvador Cordova. Today, we're privileged to be joined by Cindi Lincoln. We're going to study molecular biology. Cindi, I may mute your mic every now and then because I'm getting feedback.
Yes,
And
and remember to keep your mouth near the microphone so that you don't get garbled.
okay, all right. So I'm going to say a quick prayer. Dear Lord, help us to teach one another. It says in your word that we are able to teach one another. And so let us teach one another molecular biology tonight. And Lord, this is a cross to bear. Learning science is not easy. Help us to bear with it. Lord, these are just momentary light afflictions, building for us an eternal weight of glory far beyond all comparison. Let what we learn and what we teach each other help sharpen our ability to proclaim and declare your mighty works. In Jesus' name, amen.
Tonight, may we see the marvels of your creation. In Jesus' name, amen.
All right, so one reason that I focus on the molecular side, I've found, and let me just repeat the story, I've told it many times. I don't know many people that have been persuaded by fossil record arguments in the creation side or human chimp ancestry. In fact, I've known of stories where people studied the human chimp similarity and have become evolutionists. The most notable would be Michael Denton, who was an old Earth creationist. He became a medical student. He studied when he was in the dissection room and dissecting primates and also humans. He saw the similarity and he ended up being an atheist. He came around and became an agnostic as he studied biology in more detail, and he wrote the book Evolution, a Theory in Crisis. So he's come halfway around. He didn't come full circle back. So this is why I emphasize we have stronger arguments at the molecular and cell level. Evidence of that are people that used to be like Dean Kenyon, who was an origin of life researcher. He wrote Biochemical Predestination. He was the premier origin of life researcher. But at some point, his students confronted him, gave him a book by A.E. Wilder Smith. After 5 years, he began to have doubts, and then he abandoned his position and became an ID proponent and then a creationist. He may have been a Christian already at that time, but one of the most radical conversions I know of is of Matt Bilyeu. He was raised in a Christian home. By age about 17, he rejected the faith, declared himself an atheist, went off to school to study biology. And, he's being taught by atheists, being taught evolutionism. By his fourth year, he was taking a class in cell physiology. He looked at that and he said, everything my professors told me, how that this evolved, he said, no, they can't be right. Only God could have made this. And he rededicated his life to Jesus. 6 months later, went off to seminary, got married, and now is a defender of the faith. So all this to say, and this is not a unique story. If you see what's happening with James Tour, a lot of the Christians are encouraged with the arguments at the molecular level. This is the greatest outpouring I've seen where people are saying, yes, it's about time someone has come out and said the emperor has no clothes. The arguments are powerful, they are effective, and the other side is just getting crushed. We don't see this in the realm of talking about human chimp similarity or ancestry or whatever. We don't see it in arguments over paleontology or geology. There's a reason that I focus on the molecular and cell level. It's being handed to us on a silver platter right now. I've watched the creation evolution controversy for 40 years, and I've never seen it as successful as it is now, but it's especially powerful when we make molecular arguments. And so now I've been begging Cindi, pleading with her to to spend time learning the new arguments, learning new creationist arguments to help her. I think she has the right aim to get things done. I just suggested she just needs to sharpen her axe so she could whack the head off some of these bad arguments. And right now, it's just not quite as sharp as it could be, but I just want her to be able to swing and stop it. So you can do that when you're at the molecular and cell level. An example of that is Cindi and I were in a debate with Aaron Ra October 5th of this year. And Aaron we showed this protein orchard diagram, and I don't think he really expected that. He didn't know what to do with it, and he still doesn't know what to do with it. He wrote back, he said, let me find out more about this. And he started talking to people. And he came back to me. He said, there's no effing common ancestor of all proteins. And I was just like, well, thank you for making my point. That means at the protein level, it follows an orchard, not a universal tree.
Because the proteins are so different in form and sequence.
Exactly. So now we're going to learn.
They can't be. But Aaron conceded that they were, he called it horizontal, that there was no ancestral relationship. He's trying to make it sound like it's not a problem.
Exactly. And that's what they're all saying. Even Dr. Dan will say that. I'm just like, time out. If we had known this 40 years ago, the creationists should have pounded this case. But it wasn't as evident. It's not as brutally evident. It wasn't as brutally evident then as it is now. So we have access to arguments we didn't have. Same for the origin of life. When I was getting into this 40 years ago, and actually 45 years ago, gosh, it feels so old. They're talking about the Urey-Miller experiment. That's kind of laughable now, honestly. But
they were still using it.
They're still using it. Okay.
Aaron Ra still used it, didn't he?
I didn't hear it. So David Neff used it, and I had to call him on it.
I've heard several people use it. It stuns me.
Yeah. So this is okay. This is why we argue at the molecular level. You can get the other side when they put stuff out there because it's so bad. You just have to have the skill and you need the vocabulary to articulate arguments at the molecular level. So what we're going to do is do a little bit. We're not going to go deep into the chemistry right away because it is really difficult to get down into the chemistry. So we're going to ease you into it first with tonight's talk. We're just going to go over the alphabet of chemicals for DNA and then amino acids. And we'll talk about the central dogma of molecular biology.
But please don't sing. I love you, Sal, but please don't sing.
Okay. Well, now that you said that, the audience is going to be curious. What is it I'm going to sing?
No!
Okay, so I was singing okay, let me just sing it once for the audience's sake. I was teaching little kids, 4-year-old kids, the DNA alphabet. And kids are just like sponges. You could teach them songs they don't understand the words. And C.S. Lewis is very insightful. The way you raise the little ones is you talk to them as if they understand. And eventually they do. Isn't that magical? That's the way God made the human brain. You can talk to them as if they understand. And if you keep interacting, eventually they will. So I was talking to my little grandnephews, and I'd say, okay, A is for adenine, C is for cytosine, G is for guanine, T is for thymine. And okay, I just had them repeat and they just giggle. I said, okay, this is a game. You're going to learn how to sing. And then they'd say, now I know my ABC. Next time, won't you sing with me? And so we were doing that for a while. And then I said, let's go play Frisbee. And I want you to sing when we play Frisbee. And after a while, the little 4-year-old kid was going, A is for adenine. A is for adenine. And so there's something to be said about just rote exposure to the same thing over and over. And it starts to feel quite natural. And so it's good that you hear the chemical names frequently.
Yeah.
And there are two ways to do this. And if you're studying biochemistry, the old school would give you the index cards and say, okay, give me the letters for the DNA alphabet, list the chemicals. And the old school would be like, you even draw it. Okay, I had to do that. And I did. And then the old school
That
would be
actually would help me learn. And in fact, that's what I'm doing right now. I'm Googling it because I need to see it.
right. And then you do the same for the amino acids. But after that, because you hear these terms so much in biology, it won't take long before you start to sound like you know what you're talking about. And then you realize you do know what you're talking about.
Even though they're going to keep telling me that I don't know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Okay, so after a while, you just know that's a standard talking point. They're just going to say it whether it's just like Dave Farina saying James Tour's clueless. Okay, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you're one of the world-class professors on the planet.
So basically, they just dismiss as a tactic.
Yes.
Okay, speaking of dismissing, I want to. You were talking about the benefits of arguing at the cellular level, the orchard because of the complexity. No, the orchard is because of the differences.
Let me just say that the benefits are, whether we know what the benefits are or not, we know that there's been more, it's been effective because there have been more conversions at that level for the arguments made. There have been more people that are reassured. You don't see the...
Well, the reason I say that is because did you read that email from Chris Thompson saying that the potassium ion channel is just the new bacterial flagellum? It's irreducible complexity 2.0. Scientists can't describe the evolutionary history to my satisfactory. Therefore, it must have been assembled by baby Jesus 6,000 years ago in the Garden of Eden. Classic Mott and Bailey fallacy.
Okay, is that a scientific response?
I didn't understand it because the bacterial flagellum is a good argument.
Okay,
Whether
so,
they think so that's the dismissal. Is that what they just dismiss it, whether it's good or bad?
Of course.
So basically, they're pretending.
All he has to do to settle it is like describe why this is expected to happen. You talk about the state that it started. Okay, we sent a letter and we said, okay, can you describe the initial state, the process that acted on the initial state, and then the final state? That's a scientific. Okay.
And if not, you're arguing from a faith statement.
Right. So if you have a chemical reaction, what do you have? You have the ingredients. Okay. How about a recipe? If you're going to bake a cake, you have the ingredients, you have the recipe, and then you have the final product. So I could give you the ingredients list, the process, and you'll say, oh, that's a process that makes a cake, or that's a process that makes a stew. All right. This is not too much to ask to describe a scientific claim. What is your starting point? What was the process that acted on the ingredients? And what was the result? This is not that hard.
What they're saying is that they are processes that do not act today.
How do they know that? Okay. So how do they know that? How do they know that?
I'm just saying, is that what they argue?
I don't know what they argue. You heard what they said. They dodged it. They said no.
This
is why I'm insisting. Learn the rhetoric, and you just ask them. A scientific structure is just like kind of, okay, A basic cooking is a chemical reaction. Everyone who cooks is actually being a chemist, whether they realize it or not. You have a starting set of ingredients, right? And then you have a process, how you put the ingredients and you process them. And then you have a final product. That is classic chemical reaction. This is how science works. It's repeatable. That's why you can be given a recipe. You can expect the same outcomes. If you have the same starting points, the same process, you expect the same outcomes.
You're never going to follow a cake recipe and end up with a stew.
I mean, this is basic. I mean, if you take chemistry classes, they say, okay, these are your reagents, which are your ingredients. Now this is the process where you're going to start processing the reagents, and you have products, and you expect certain outcomes. And sometimes you might have mixed outcomes, but you'll have proportions of different chemicals in your beaker, and that's okay. They'll say, okay, this is at this temperature and at this whatever, you're going to get all of these proportions. And that's what science is about. So I was just saying, okay, Aaron, Dr. Chris, can you give us verified claims of the initial states, the process?
Can you give us either the reactant, the process, or the products? Can you give us any of them?
Now, I mean, we knocked them on their heels a little bit. I mean, is that a fair claim? I mean, any other science, that's what you would expect if you're going to call it science.
So actually, he was saying if they can't describe an evolutionary history to our satisfaction, therefore God.
No, it's not even
there
that.
There is no evolutionary.
Let me put it this way. Strictly speaking, I said, I'm not even going that high. How about, therefore, you have no scientific theory, therefore you have faith. You see, they're putting the burden on us. All you have to do is say, this is not science. This is your faith statement. You've already begun to level the playing field.
Well,
don't go right to God. Because I know their trick. It's like, you're going to argue God. I said, I will eventually, but the first requirement is you show that you have a faith statement that's not based on science. Stop pretending it's science. It's a faith statement. Is that right?
Well, that's kind of what I was getting at, because there is no evolutionary history to chemical reactions. They've always been the same. Reactants plus process always equals the same product, unless you have different pressure, oxygen or no oxygen, different temperature,
which are different.
There's no evolution to it. It's a static process.
Right. So he misconstrued my argument. All I'm saying at first, I said, I will get to there. But first, my argument is you have to stop claiming it's science. It's a faith-based statement on your part.
Because chemistry really resists this evolutionary imagination.
Right. This is why it's good to this is why it's so powerful, because when you get someone that actually knows the chemistry and you can articulate it, you're going to be very effective. And even if you can't, you now know the resources you point to. And I've been trying
to realize that molecular biology is chemistry.
I'll tell you more. It's what it is. It is a mix of genetics. It has some biology, lots of chemistry in it. It combines a lot of fields. Okay, so it's a good starting point because it's not pure chemistry like James Tour. It's not pure organic, organic chemistry. It's not that. It has biology. It's kind of a step in between. So you have cellular biology, which is the parts of the cell. And then you have molecular biology, which is even a little closer to the biochemistry. specifically for the central dogma of molecular biology, and that's what we'll talk about. If you start with the central dogma of molecular biology, it's a good starting point. You can go back up to the to the cellular level and back down to the origin of life. It's a good starting point. And I'm sorry, I get in trouble with other creationists. I wish I'd said, guys, no disrespect, but you're not helping the young by emphasizing all this baraminology stuff. I haven't known anyone that became a Christian because of baraminology. You're focusing so much on human chimp ancestry and the fossil record. You guys can't even agree amongst yourselves what's what. All these arguments over was that human or not, and just like you're letting the enemy, our opponents, just chew you up. I saw Charles Jackson argue with Aaron Ra, and I said Aaron Ra cut him to shreds. Charles Jackson is a acquaintance of mine, a friend that I've known since college years at George Mason University, and I said, yeah, you just played right into his hands. You argue the molecular level, you won't get chewed up like that. I'm trying to tell you, it's like you keep trying to also argue like Noah's flood and stuff. It's just like, no, you can do that. That's appropriate. But you put it in order of the most important. Take your best arguments, argue those first, then you work your way backward.
They were very insistent about about trying to make us argue about Noah.
Why do you think they're doing that? They feel it's our Achilles heel. And I've said, this is a very hard topic to deal with, and the Lord is giving us pieces as we come along, but it's not yet mature. There's a reason that they were trying to maneuver us to talk about it, because they knew they couldn't.
Well, they full on said it's demonstrably falsifiable.
Yeah. See, this is all. Yeah, and that's when you take the bait, is when you try to refute their points. What you do is you don't even argue, or when you try to refute their points, you're not arguing on their territory. What you did very well was to keep showing up that protein orchard in the discussion.
Honey, will you do me a favor?
Yeah.
Will you turn off the computer or the television screen behind your head?
All righty.
It's distracting.
That's
Are
Fox
you watching
News.
it?
It's just, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
That's okay. I like distracting people. If they get bored, they can watch. I try to figure out what I'm watching. I'll just say it's Fox News. It's better than CNN or MSNBC.
And I didn't mean to sidetrack you off of your ACTG, but it was really burning in my.
Okay, so I'm just saying we have testimonial evidence of what has changed people's hearts. And I get upset that creationists keep going back to the same things that are not as effective, when God's handed it to you on a silver platter.
They probably don't realize that, because the whole ICR thing is what really helped me. And so it wouldn't occur to me that it wouldn't help other people.
So I get some flack from, it's very mild, but, just a little bit of pushback, because Creation Research Society wants to talk about baramins and have models. I'm just like, well, I wrote a letter politely, and I didn't get a hostile reaction, just mild disagreement. I said that anti-evolutionism is more important.
And they must not like that, because that's their whole work. That's their whole goal, their whole focus.
And God can use that.
I think so, because Aaron and Chris were definitely hitting on it.
Yeah, but I've been around this long enough. And the other thing that I have, the reason I'm insistent on this, remember, I nearly left the Christian faith 20 years ago. By the way, can you turn down your volume like half and see if that cuts down the feedback?
I have a thunderstorm going on, and I have a metal roof. So I don't know if that's what you're hearing. I just turned the volume down. Did that help?
Let me see if I can hear. I don't hear my feedback as much. So you might have to adjust it when it's a little bit too loud on your end because of the thunderstorm, but that really reduced. I don't hear my feedback anymore.
Yay.
It's clear. It's very clear.
I'm at
Now,
52% now.
yeah. What can help is at some point in the extreme, you have a, you'll have to use the earpiece, but that's cumbersome and I get that. So this is a lot better now. So we've actually diagnosed what the problem has been. Boy, I saw a lightning strike.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully the people that bother, hopefully Steve Lynn doesn't like thunderstorms.
Yeah.
Won't be on your property.
So, honey, what you were saying about baraminology, one way possibly we could have pushed back on that is just say, I'm satisfied with the arguments I've heard on baraminology. If you would like to discuss it further, go to baraminology.com or whatever person you were talking about that you were.
Yeah, I said I'm not a baraminologist, and it doesn't matter because what happened. The important thing is at the cellular and protein level. You know what? I don't even engage them at some point. This is the thing to say is you could say, I'm sorry, what I have to say supersedes everything else. You don't have to justify yourself any more than saying that. What I insist on takes precedence because cells take precedence over full organisms. If you can't,
and they were mocking you on that. They were mocking you and saying, Sal just wants to harp on those protein orchards.
Well, you don't have evolution if you don't have new proteins. I mean, this is okay. Remember,
you can't say evolution is the only explanation for all the biodiversity.
Right.
If you just presented a protein orchard, it's clearly not evolutionary.
See, this is okay. Remember, they're manipulating the art. What is the terms of the engagement? So we had a show way back, I think in February, on fighter tactics, and it was a 4-hour thing. It said the number one rule is you do not fight on ground that they're choosing. Number one rule is you do not engage the enemy on ground that they're choosing.
You got to speak louder, babe. You do not engage on what?
You do not engage the enemy on ground of his choosing.
Oh, right. Basically on home turf.
Right. You make him fight on the ground of your choosing, and if he doesn't want to fight, okay. You just keep making your point. So this, Erica invited Rebecca onto her channel to talk, creation evolution, and she forced Rebecca to talk about human chimp ancestry. Rebecca, you're going to get chewed to pieces.
And you were cringing, going, Rebecca, don't go down that road. Rebecca, no. Rebecca, no.
Okay, so I asked, right? I think I can share this. I asked Rebecca. I said, "How'd you go?" She said, "Oh, it sucked." She made a video that said it sucks to be a young Earth creationist because it was such a bad experience. I said, "Okay, how do you think Erica did on Origin of Life?" She said she got beat 3 times quite decisively.
She got what?
She got beat. Erica got beat decisively on Origin of Life 3 times decisively.
In other words, abiogenesis?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
So what's the lesson? You do not fight them on ground that they're choosing. You start with abiogenesis if that's the agreed upon thing. And if the topic is evolution, you can talk then about eukaryotic evolution and protein orchards. Why don't you turn up the volume a little bit? So how about we try 75%? That sounds good. Okay. So what creation is?
And again, when you have the victory in abiogenesis arguments, they dismiss it as unimportant.
Okay, this is what I see creationists do. Evolutionists will come and say, this is our evidence. And then the creationists will say, oh, we're going to try to pick that apart. And it's like, no, you don't do that. you bring your best evidence and you say, this is why this supersedes anything else you say.
I believe this is the crux of the matter. Was life created, or was life naturally, spontaneously arrived?
Okay.
Was there a God or a no God?
That's the first one. And so there are theistic evolutionists, I know, that believe the first life was a miracle, but then it evolved naturally afterward.
Why? You have a God that only can do a miracle once?
That's what they believe. Okay, I know them. All right. But so what they'll do is they'll say, okay, after the first life, then then it either evolved or there were creationary steps. And I said, okay, that's where our debate really started. Was we assumed common descent. We didn't talk about origin of life, but we started with the protein parts. Yeah. The one thing we got out of the debate that
there's no common ancestor.
There's no effing common ancestor of proteins. See, I kept quoting Dr. Dan, but now it's Aaron Ra. It's like, okay, Aaron, we're going to keep quoting that because now it starts to be clear. You don't have, and the reasons that it's going to pay a lot of dividends. It's going to be very profitable that we start from that basis because now if we use that as our starting point, we can now start to talk about the improbabilities. So what Dr. Chris was saying, he said, that's your argument. It's like, no, not quite. There are two arguments. First off, I just needed to demonstrate you're only pretending you have science there. It's a faith statement on your part. Is that right? They don't want to admit that.
Oh, no.
So now it's my faith against your faith. Now the question is, which is more reasonable? Now we can talk. So he didn't like it, and I'm like, I don't care. Our argument is two phases. Now, if you look at James Tour's critique of Dave Farina, he doesn't even say therefore God. He never said that. He didn't have to. All he had to do is say, this problem has not been solved. And he just hammered it. And he said,
look that over and over again.
Not only has it not been solved, but there has been fraud. There's been misleading. And he was taunting the guys who came on Dave Farina's channel and started criticizing James Tour. James Tour said, okay, in 2012, this guy said he'll solve the origin of life problem in 2 years. And he said, how's it coming? How's it going there, Seth? How's it going there, Lee? How's it going there, Steve Benner? Because all of them saying,
the problem is getting worse, not better, is what he kept saying.
Okay. Now, do you see the effect there that he didn't have to make the conclusion God did it? He just needed to show the fraudulent science, the misleading claims being made, and why the chemistry is being misrepresented and doesn't work. And that was the case for natural you. He didn't have someone there saying, therefore God. All you had to do is study cellular physiology, and he realized it on his own. And that's the easiest argument you'll make. You can draw your conclusions. In Dr. Sanford's book, Genetic Entropy, he said, this is what I set out to do. From this point on, after the introduction, it's just all science. At the very end, he said, okay, now I'm going to talk about my own theological view. Jesus is our hope. But we're like 200 pages, all science, the first page about God, the last page about God.
And I just have to point out that Aaron, Ra, and Chris, they did not talk about science much.
No.
They kept promising that they could demonstrate and did.
Exactly. All right, so now this was valuable to try to persuade you. If you can get really good on the molecular biology, the good thing is you don't have to teach it yourself. you can at least go to videos, but then now you'll really understand the videos better, and you can teach, if you have questions, you can hammer it effectively. And I'm also sorry to say that you're going to be outside of, I'm sorry about that, that my audio's clicking out. I hate StreamYard. So let me increase, let me see if I can adjust my settings here. I'm going to crank up my audio all the way up. I'm at 200.
Because I noticed there was one time when it was coming clear, like you had your mouth close to the mic, but you didn't move your mic and it became unclear.
Yeah, I'm going to see if I could switch this to omnidirectional. 1 second. There's supposed to be an omnidirectional setting. Anyway, I cranked up my mic sensitivity all the way to the max. I hate StreamYard. Labs is better. Thank you for the feedback, Dr. Tour. I'll call you Dr. Tour for short. It's Dr. Tour Destroys Evolution. I'll call you Dr. Tour for short. We know it's not the real Dr. James Tour, but
okay, that was my question.
Yeah. No, he wouldn't come on. He wouldn't waste time on this channel. Although he featured Dr. Sanford on his show for an hour and a half on his Faith Science podcast. And I was very honored. Dr. Sanford referred to some of my work without mentioning me by name, but I was very honored. He mentioned post-translational modifications. I was like, yeah, I'm the one who brought that to the table. So we'll learn about that too.
I was going to say, now you make me curious.
Okay, so if for nothing else, it's good that you can learn this, because then when you share the videos and you point people to it, you could at least resist the accusation you don't understand. You'll understand it, and you'll know this is also a way for you to know why these are good arguments. And you might be able to have the gift of being able to communicate it to people without being too technical. So James Tour is very technical. The Discovery Institute videos are not, but it took a lot of hard work, 5 months, 3 months, 5 PhDs and an illustrator to be able to make a 10-minute video. So the videos are very, very powerful. Anything graphical is very powerful, because a picture's worth 1,000 words, and we tried to leverage that in our discussion. The other thing is, as far as debates go, and if you start showing up on people's channels, because I know you're going to be asked, people are already asking you, don't go for the bait. You say cells supersede this. They're going to ask you about the fossil record, ask you Noah's flood, say I'm just going to go to a basal level. The first consideration is evolution. Is evolution even science? Because I saw you go on Amy Newman's channel, and they're peppering with questions. They're polite. God bless them for being polite. But I felt that you did well. But I think, again, you have the sharper axe. You can start to cut the arguments off. All right. So the molecular and cell. And the other thing is, when you can talk articulately about molecular and cell biology, will be respected.
Honey, one of the big deals about molecular and cell is complexity, isn't it?
Yes, but it's so clear. It's so clear. Okay, this is like when you argue full organism level, this is like looking at a car, a modern car, and you're just comparing it to other cars. So when you hear, Dapper Dino loves dinosaurs, and so does Jackson. They all talk about that. They're comparing this and say that evolved from that, that evolved from that. But it's different when you actually open up the car and you start to decompose all the parts, and you talk about each of the parts. That's where you see the complexity. It's at that level of detail. It's exactly as you say. The car is more complex than the parts, but you don't really appreciate the complexity until you get to the molecular level. That's where it's so brutally obvious that it can't evolve.
Because the parts themselves are too complex.
Right. But this
and
is like,
because somebody has to know that this complex part is required to make this whole part work.
okay, let's take an analogy. Let's say all we did is just look at the shape of the car, like we gutted the engine and all the electronics and whatever. And all you did is just have the frame, comparing the shapes of the cars. And say, see how easy it is to evolve this or that. It's not that complex. So you look at the fossil record, what do you have? You rarely have the molecules. You rarely have the cellular physiology because it's all dead. All you have is the bone shapes. And they kind of make it like, well, see, this bone is shaped this way. It's not that hard to make a bone that's shaped a little bit differently.
I believe that's pretty much where the missing links come in from. Basically, they're saying, oh, the shape is similar. Just push it a little bit, squeeze it a little bit, and there you go.
Okay, so now let's go to the car parts. The cars in the I hope you unfreeze there, Cindi. Cindi. I think we lost Cindi. Let me see if I'm still live here. I'm going to go to my monitor here. And I'm going to see if she's... let me see. I hope you're still there. And I'm going to see if I'm still... Okay, she's having connection issues. And... All right, she's still frozen. Okay. Okay, turn up. You may want to turn off your camera, Cindi. All right. Can you try to say something? Cindi, are you there? Yeah, I think the internet's wiping out her connection. So we'll go to plan B here. She still might be able to hear me, but we can't hear her. So we might have to continue this discussion another time. But so let's just try to make lemonade out of this lemon in the meantime. I was talking about the car, the shapes. If you're just comparing the raw shapes, it doesn't look like it's a big difference. But the cars from the 1940s, like, they may have superficial resemblance to the cars of today. But the cars of today, especially if you have a hybrid car, the insides are very different. A hybrid car will have the electric motors and the engine tied to the same flywheel or drivetrain. The engines may not use carburetors, but instead fuel injection. And there's computer control, all sorts of different kind of timing mechanisms. A computer itself is a huge leap in technology. You have very large scale integrated circuits. You have silicon chips or whatever. You have software. Then you have GPS systems. Telecommunications that help the GPS systems that integrate the connection to the satellites, and then you have the cell phone towers that will then provide the GPS maps that will take the GPS coordinates in terms of lat long and translate it to roads, and it'll tell you how to navigate the roads. It'll give you the pictures. It'll also predict. There's cruise controls. There is, and then now they have air conditioning. They have airbags. You can't tell these great leaps of technology that are there, that are gargantuan leaps from a technological standpoint in terms of the difficulty of what it took to be able to add that to the car. Now, the basic thing of the car getting you from point A to B is always there, but all the stuff that is added is significantly. You can't describe it just by looking at the superficial shapes. This is the problem with evolutionary theory. You're looking at the things in the fossil record as they change shape, and you'll say, oh, it's not that big a deal to change from one shape to another. And let's even grant that. But when you get to the molecular level, you realize, oh boy, it really was a pretty big leap in terms of the molecules. And you really see it when you start to study at the molecular level. The protein orchard is a start, but then even beyond that, you look at all the systems. So you can even take the same protein across species, and it's used in fabulously different ways. So the cryptochrome protein, say, that is used in the human eye, is used spectacularly in certain bird eyes. They can actually see magnetic fields with them. And there are papers on this. How that capability was added is not trivial. Not trivial. I mean, the evolutionary biologists will say, oh, phylogenetically, it's about the same, just, change of a few hundred residues here or there. I'm just like, no, it's not. It's not just that protein that has to change. You have to have all the machinery that utilizes those changes. And it's not just the change in the cryptochrome. You might have to have other simultaneous changes to enable that capability, where the bird has sufficient magnetic vision to be able to travel from the North to the South Pole. Now, I'm going to look at my telephone here, and I see Cindy's trying to communicate to me. Let me try to call her, and we'll see if we'll continue the show another time.
Hi, sweetheart. I'm calling tech support. I think I don't have internet.
Okay. Do you want to try this on your?
They're on hold.
Do you want to try to connect through your cell phone?
That's what I'm doing, and my internet's not working on my cell phone either.
Okay. So I'm going to tell the audience we have a technical difficulty. We can resume another day. Do you want to try that?
Yeah, I was hoping to get back on.
Okay, we'll continue the discussion. I'm just going to retitle I'm going to retitle the show a little bit. And by the way, this is funny. Since we are mostly just talking, they can hear. I think the audience might be able to hear you on my cell phone. Because you're on speakerphone now, and I could just respond to your questions, and then we'll close it out. So how about we talk for 10 more minutes, okay? Would that work for you, Cindy? Oh, I think we lost Cindy. All right. She put me on hold because she's talking to tech support, that she lost her internet. I could see the on hold sign here. So let me take this opportunity to say she is in a legal battle with Kent Hovind right now. And in the video description is a GoFundMe. So if you'd like to...
I think I'm back on.
Okay, I'll stand by. I was just telling the audience that they can hear you because you're on speakerphone.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can you see me?
Not yet. I don't see you in the studio yet.
Oh, wait. Okay.
All right. I'm going to unspeakerphone you. Hang on. Cindy, are you there?
Michelle, can you hear me?
Yes.
Booyah.
Did tech support fix you, or did they just say we're
No.
working?
I don't know what happened.
They probably reconnected everything. If you get another lightning strike, that might in a key spot that might stop us. So, do you want to try turning on your video now?
I think it's wise to leave it off, don't you? I can put, here I am.
Yeah, you could turn it off. Are you using your phone?
Yeah, I'm on my phone now.
It looks really good. Okay, phones generally have worked well for me.
Okay, let's go.
Okay, there is some static sound on your end with the phone. Now, maybe you do have to, why don't you turn it off, the camera, and we'll go.
Does that make it sound better?
A little better.
I turned it down a little bit. It's about 75%.
Okay. Okay, so we'll just alternate. It's nice to, I can also see when you, the reason it's nice to have the video is I could tell when you want to say something.
Thank you.
Okay, so we spent an hour talking about the importance of the cell and molecular level, and then also the thing to say is when they start asking you that and say that's a good question, but everything else, the considerations at the molecular and cell level take precedence over every other consideration.
There's
You don't have
obfuscating, but whatever.
But the thing is, remember, you're not trying to necessarily flip them. There might be people that are on the side that want to hear you defend your point well.
And
There might be.
What I would feel comfortable saying is like, these arguments are just so amazing. I want to focus on them.
Yes. Okay. So now let's go back to the analogy. So if you look at a car in the 1940s versus the car in 2022, this is like 80 years later. Superficially, the cars look the same, right? From the outside. But you know that by the way, when you move your telephone, I can hear every click.
I'm trying to amplify the sound, putting a cup under the mic.
Okay, I'll wait till you're done.
I don't think it's going to work. Say something.
Something. All right.
Okay.
So I
Go ahead.
was saying that the car that you see in the 1940s, shape-wise and performance-wise, it looks very similar superficially to the car of 80 years later, 2020, 2022. But then it's easy to kind of overlook the improvements at the molecular level, even in regards to a car, because the modern day car, like say, let's take a hybrid, like say a Kia hybrid that is a combination electric and engine. It has computers. A computer that is implemented on VLSI transistorized technology is, I mean, it's a spectacular amount of technology there. And you wouldn't recognize, I mean, this is like saying we're trying to explain the change in the computer system that wasn't there, that's now there in the present day car versus the 1940s car based on the change in shape. That's stupid. So there are a lot of things that are molecular changes that are huge leaps of technology that you can't capture by the rote bone structure. This is ridiculous. So I'll give you an example. Since we're talking, the modern car has GPS. It connects to the satellite signals, and then it connects to the cell towers. The GPS satellites give the latitude, longitudinal position. The cell towers help provide downloading mapping data, so you can translate your latitude, longitude from the GPS satellites into maps onto this, your location on a street. Because a latitude, longitude are just numbers, but it's nice it can be translated to a position on a street or highway. etc., and you're this many miles from your next turn, etc. And then the computer will then enable you to will start to be able to give you even driving directions and all sorts of nice things. So can we tell that change in technology just by looking at the change in the shape of a car from 1940 to today? That's ridiculous. And you can't say, oh, just because we have a change in this, that proves the evolution of this is very natural. It doesn't work that way. When you actually study it at the molecular level, you see the difference. I'll give you an example specifically with a bird. The bird has a cryptochrome protein. We have cryptochrome proteins that enable our vision. But the bird, particularly the Arctic tern, has a particular modification to the cryptochrome protein, plus some other systems, that enables them to see magnetic fields. They can see magnetic fields so clearly, they also have a way of memorizing the look of the magnetic field. They can make magnetic maps. The reason we know that, the Arctic tern can fly from the North Pole to the South Pole, and it doesn't take a straight course. They can all land in the same spot in the ocean, in the middle of nowhere, to group and rest. And they know how to do it. You're muted, Cindy. Cindy, you're muted.
I heard that the Arctic fox has magnetic sensors.
But the Arctic tern has it even better, because we have studied this. We put little radio tags on their feet, and we can track their migration, and our jaw dropped. Being a pilot, the last piece of navigation equipment I'd ever want to use is a magnetic compass. To use it effectively, historically, you needed really good clocks. So in maritime, before airplanes, the ships navigating out there, they needed good maps. They needed to have positions of the stars. They needed very good clocks, because the clocks gave you the time of day, and this is the angles and stuff you would have to look. And then if you had the compass, that would help you. And you had to build all these maps. This was painstaking work. But the birds are able to do with their magnetic sensing what took us a long time to figure out, and they could do it as well, almost as if they had GPS. Same for the monarch butterfly. We don't know how the monarch butterfly does its thing, but we do know. We know that the monarch butterfly uses a different magnetic sensing apparatus. We don't know the exact mechanism. We do know we have characterized the magnetic sensing apparatus in the eye. It uses something called hyperfine transitions and quantum spin chemistry. I looked at the papers that did this, and you know that I study physics. There's my physics degree up there, by the way, from Johns Hopkins. It made me crawl when I read through that paper. The math was so difficult. The computation that God gave to that bird to figure out, it was doing these Poisson brackets and Hamiltonians, and you mean that's all wired into the bird? Think about how hard it is to make a drone that can fly from north to south. We know this now because we have defense technology, and we're seeing how hard it is to make a flying object that can navigate to target. That's what a cruise missile does. But we have to have all these GPS satellites and all. The bird has all of this. It has all the maps inside. It figures out how to make a map, and then how to use the map it's made. And somehow it also transmits it to its offspring. We don't know how. This is staggering. And I said, guys, you think looking at the fossil record is going to let you see the complexity that's there, much less is it going to explain how it evolves. And I said, creationist, why do you want to argue the fossil record? It doesn't have this level of detail And you're not going to be able to challenge the evolutionist if you're going to be arguing, oh, about this little shape or this little vertebrate. It's like you're just missing out on all the great stuff. I happen to know this had an effect on my classmates. I was taking a cell biology class. We're required to make a presentation to the class, 5-minute presentation on any topic related to biology, preferably the cell. And these guys were people that were on the staff of the NIH. Our professor was the dean of the school. And I gave my presentation on 2 things. I said, okay, I have an electrical engineering background, and I'm going to cover first electric navigation, and then finally magnetic navigation. I gave the presentation on magnetic navigation. In front of the professor, one of the fellow students says, "This makes it hard to believe this evolved." That's why we want to talk at this level. I get that reaction when you start to go into the details of the mechanics. If you're just looking at these bones buried up in the fossil record, you'll just have these long conversations. Oh, what about the bird dino transition or whatever? And these arguments aren't going to go anywhere. You can't even get creationists to agree with each other. That's not a good starting point. So once you start to learn molecular biology, you'll begin to have the appropriate language to describe this to the next generation. And then the reason that you'll have more ability to do it now is the kids today are tech savvy. They understand GPS. You can communicate, and you can give them exercises and say, okay, let's just say you go out there and you try to navigate without GPS now. You're going to see how hard it is. What does it take to know where you are and how to get there in the modern day? Do you think you can even get 5 miles to the right spot if you didn't have a lot of help? The birds are able to do this. They can travel. The Arctic tern travels 40,000 miles a year. 40,000 miles a year. It's
That's
go on, Cindi.
South Pole like 4 times.
It doesn't go a direct route. People can check me. Why don't I just show this on Wikipedia here? This is why, this is why I get frustrated with the baraminologists. I'm like, guys, this is being handed to you on a silver platter. You don't want to talk about it. You want to talk about anyway.
Well, maybe they're not in it.
Well, in any case, that makes me more unique, because then I'd be one of the few creations to talk about it. I'm like, okay, well, if that helps me kind of make my brand name niche, that's better, because you have all these baraminologists, and then here's me, kind of the outlier that wants to talk about magnetic navigation. So
It's kind of your thing.
yeah, well, because I was in the defense and aviation industry as an engineer for 20 years, a scientist and engineer. I appreciate how hard it is to make navigation systems.
Right, and we don't. A layperson doesn't.
But we can teach kids how hard it is. I said, okay, try to navigate 10 miles without any help. Then you'll learn how hard navigation is. The reason it was impressed upon me is if you're a pilot and you get lost, that's really scary. Because if you can't find a place to land your airplane, you're going to run out of fuel and die. You're going to have to land on someone's roof or something. I mean, there's just a lot of not very pleasant alternatives. So it's impressed upon you what happens. And really, when I look at the World War II era and pre-era, a lot of pilots died because they couldn't, they're lost in the clouds, in the fog, and they couldn't see where they're going. They'd crash into a mountain. I mean, it's really sad. And we had, when you read this, you begin to say, wow, you begin to appreciate first the human technology. And then one thing I did in my class presentation at the NIH is I showed a picture of an old style navigation system. Okay. Let me just see one. And I said, this is pre-GPS. Let me see if I could. I had a beautiful picture of an old style navigation system. Navigation.
I have a picture in mind because my dad used to fly. Basically, it's a bunch of circular gauges on a dash, right?
Oh, there all sorts of. I mean, it was pre-GPS. Okay, let's see. Pre-GPS. See if they have pictures of pre. And I had to look so hard to find this. Let's see, navigator.
I wish I could make my screen large. You are only like 1 inch on my phone, and I don't
Oh,
do full screen.
okay, how about we look at. Oh boy, let's see. I wanted to see navigation. Okay, so that's the Lancaster. How about we do two. Okay, that's a little too modern. How about Catalina? Oh, you look bigger.
Well, I put my phone on the side.
Yes, that helps. Catalina.
No, there's no square to click to make full screen.
I had a beautiful picture for my class presentation.
It should be in your documents.
Yeah, I've misplaced. I've since misplaced them. I mean, I have so many documents that I made. Let me see. Radio navigator. They had radio navigation. You know, these are so old, but I'm looking at them. Okay. Why don't I just show some of the pictures here? The first thing is you need a map. Let me show a map.
Yeah, I was going to say, you were saying if
Cindi, are you there? Cindi, what happened to you? Are you there? Cindi, we lost audio. Okay, she's going to reconnect, God willing.
sorry, honey, I got a phone call and it cut me off.
Yeah, that'll happen. Navigator console, navigator station. 1950s. See if I can get a picture. Picture's worth 1,000 words. There it is. That's the thing I wanted to show. This This is almost exactly the photo I had. Cindy, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Can you hear me?
Yes. All right. Do you see this is the navigator's station here. See all the dials and things he needs to navigate? And then on top of that, you need, in the old days, even before that, you had charts, chart, maritime chart, and compass. See if we can go here. This was the equipment they used to figure out how to get from point A to point B. You had a map, there's a compass, and there's a sextant, and you had all these tables that you could look up the stars at the time of day. You needed a very precise clock. And you look at the tables, if you had a certain time of day, a certain time of day, that's why you needed the precise clock. You could use the sextant to look up into the stars or the sun, and you can get an estimate of your position. And then you use the compass to supplement it, and you had these maps and tables.
Because the stars are only in the proper position at a certain time.
Right.
Oh, wow.
This is navigating is not trivial. A lot of guys died because they couldn't figure the way back home.
Well, and you can't look at the map if you can't see anything but ocean.
Exactly. The way you figured out where you were was you had to look, right? You had to look up. You can use your compass a little bit. I mean, try just doing this. Okay, let's say you're trying to get from France down to Florida, and all you had is this compass. Think how
And you
hard that is.
didn't already have in your mind a map of the globe where you would know that Florida was due west and due south.
Right. So what you'd have to do is you'd have to kind of, what they did, what the mariners did, is they would go out there and just be recording. They had a very precise clock. They at least had a good time, and they'd record all these measurements, and they'd go back home and say, okay, we went out this far. This is what we saw at this position. And they'd go a little farther next time. And then when they hit land, they said, okay, this is the conditions. They go back home, and now they're building these maps very painstakingly. Trial and error. It was agonizing. This is why the early explorers were so celebrated, because they're basically making maps for us. We began to know the shape, the structure of the planet. We did not know. I mean, this is just, and this is what
Are you familiar with the Antikythera device?
I'm not, I've heard, is that the ancient compass from the Greeks? The ancient navigational computer?
It looks like a computer. It has multiple gears like a clock.
Yeah. This is exactly. There's some excellent technology. I mean, it's spectacular that they had that command of technology back then, but it's
even
also
what you were saying about clocks. They didn't have clocks back then.
Yeah.
And there's a show called The Star of Bethlehem that highlights this software where you can put in any time, any place. Like, obviously they're trying to figure out when the Star of Bethlehem appeared, and you can see the sky at that time at that place.
Cindy, I'm going to get some coffee from my throat. Please talk. I can hear you. It's okay. Keep talking.
I didn't realize that you would have to put in a certain time as well, because if you look at the sky at 6 p.m., the stars are going to be in a different place than if you look at the sky at midnight. So they would have had to have ancient technology. That's a whole nother subject. But I'm I don't know how you feel about that, Sal, but I think that they did. I think that the way all the ancient pyramids faced certain directions and would have pictures of constellations and Orion, and they were not as lacking in technology as we think. Yeah, that's cool stuff. No fair, you get coffee.
Okay, Cindy, I'm back. Did you have to take a call?
I was just responding to the text to see if it was an emergency. It's not an emergency.
Okay. So, see, this was a worthwhile conversation because now you're starting to see
The
how to
complexity involved.
yes. This is why you don't want to waste time on the fossil record. Look what everyone is missing out on. If you're going to have the conversation talking about the bird dino transition or the human chimp ancestry, look what you miss out on. This is so easy and this is compelling, and there'll be people in your audience that can appreciate this. Anyone who's hiking and they get lost, it's a scary experience.
Wow, Sal. So they're just going to dismiss it like they did the bacteria flagellum and the potassium ion.
Can you shut off your camera? Let's see if that improves the audio.
Sure. How's that testing?
There's still some static. That may be that the cell phone can't handle the computation of the audio.
I turned my down a little bit.
There might be other processes running on your phone, and that's sometimes hard to kill.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I had a big screen. There's big screen, a little bigger. I want you to keep going with what your plan was for tonight.
Okay, so when you went to check your text, that's when we started getting a lot of static. Can you press something that'll close all your applications?
No, I don't think I can, honey.
Okay, are you using your computer or your cell phone?
Cell phone. Should I try and boot up my computer again? The rain is stopping, and it seems like I've got internet now. So.
Okay, go ahead, and I'll continue. So just mute yourself, or I'll mute you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's better if you mute yourself. Okay. So I was talking about this prosecuting. Again, I'm giving some examples of where you can take things when you argue at the molecular level. You can, a good example would be the cryptochrome protein that's able to do quantum spin chemistry. And I don't even know all the details. Why don't I just bring this up from Discover magazine? And I read this in my classroom presentation. Greetings, Mr. Jetty. So let's see here. Chrome Discover. Let's see. Birds navigate using magnetic compass vision. All right, so for anyone in the aerospace industry, particularly, or the maritime industry that's involved in navigation, GPS or whatever, you guys will appreciate this. I'm just going to read this. For decades, scientists have known that the migratory birds use Earth's geomagnetic field along with light, stars, and other cues to guide them on remarkably long journeys. But it is unclear just how birds sense this relatively weak field and use it for navigation. Now, German researchers have provided new evidence supporting the notion that migratory birds actually see magnetic fields. Postdoctoral fellow Dominic Hyers and his colleagues peered into the brains of garden warblers, which travel seasonally between northern Europe and southern Africa, and uncovered a link between neurons in the eye and a region of the brain thought to be involved in migration. To see how the warblers perceive magnetic fields, the team first had to get the birds in a migratory mood, which they did by shortening the bird's exposure to light, Hayers says. Then they injected a dye into cluster N, a region of the brain that is likely related to migration because it is highly active at night. And when birds are keen to migrate, says the group leader, Henrik Mordison, then the researchers injected a second dye into the bird's eyes. Sure enough, the two dyes oozed along different sets of neurons and met at the thalamus, a relay station for visual information deep in the brain. The data supports a theory first proposed in the late 1970s that has been bolstered by increasing evidence over the past 10 to 15 years. That birds collect magnetic field information through specialized receptors in the eye. Researchers don't know for sure what this receptor would be, but cryptochrome, a protein known to be involved in some animals' circadian rhythms, has been found in the eyes of several migratory birds and is a prime candidate. Several years ago, biophysicists predicted the properties that a magnetic field sensing molecule should have, and cryptochrome fit the bill. Unlike typical bird photoreceptor proteins that change shape when they absorb light energy, cryptochrome generates free electrons when it absorbs light. Earth's magnetic field may influence the spin of these free electrons, which birds could then detect, explains biophysicist Thorsten Ritz of the University of California at Irvine, who was not involved in the higher study. If so, then north and south look inherently different to migratory birds. And even when flying over open oceans on a starless night, they may use that distinction to stay on course. Researchers have long known that migratory birds receive information about magnetic fields from a part of their upper beak called the magnetite receptor, which contains iron-based magnetic crystals. This receptor seems to measure the strength of the magnetic field in the field. The field is generally strongest at the poles, and the angle of the field in relation to the ground, which also varies with latitude. Hyers suggests that the magnetite receptor and the visual magnetic receptor complement one another, with the birds using the receptors in the beaks like GPS and using visual magnetic information like a compass to determine which way they are facing. If you have a direction but don't know where you are, that probably won't help you find your way, Hyers explains. The dark spot called north. So if birds actually do see the geomagnetic field, what does it look like? We don't know exactly how it looks at all, Mortensen said, based on the theory that magnetic fields affect the overall light sensitivity of birds' eyes. Hyers' best guess is that birds see north as a dark spot with a gradient of light representing other directions. Still, there are many remaining questions. While Ritz calls the new study, and I'm sorry, I should have shown this. Ritz calls the new study interesting and really necessary. He also emphasizes that the new data correlate vision with magnetic field sensing rather than absolutely defining the neural pathway. Rachel Muheim, a postdoctoral fellow at Virginia Tech, agrees, saying that there are still questions about whether the vision related cluster N is involved in detecting magnetic fields or just in night vision. Definitive proof is still lacking, Murtason admits. Still, he argues the differences in cluster N activity between migratory and non-migratory birds indicate it does have a role in navigation. And the new data fit predictions of the visual magnetic field perception theory. We have a lot of correlative evidence that is very hard to explain if this is not true. Okay, so that was one of them. Now let me look. Cindi, are you there?
Yes, sir. Wow.
Okay. This is why you want to, you want to deal with the evolutionists at this level.
You know, this reminds me a lot of Job Martin.
Yes. Yes, he loves talking about that. You showed that video to your kids, or you were raised on it?
Yes. Well, no, I wasn't saved till I was in college, but I was exposed to it after I was saved.
Okay, so
What does he call it?
all right. So when you want to talk creation science, don't let what's the first principle in engaging the other side? Don't let them decide.
Don't engage
don't
on
let them
their-
choose.
on the turf of their
Right.
choice.
Right, you don't. Exactly, the ground of their choosing.
And really, the only way to do that without seeming evasive, although you've given me some ideas, but they're escaping me right now, it would seem more wise to start the debate by defining the topic.
Term. Right. And you could remember, you could just say this consideration, I think, supersedes everything else. Everything else pales in comparison.
Yeah.
That's
And it
another way.
It
Yeah.
also, I believe, I mean, I've heard atheists deny this, but I think this is what Romans teaches, that the creation screams creator. And it's these kinds of things that scream.
Yes. Focus on this. So do I have humans? Okay. So this was, here it is on, humans have a magnetic sensor in our eyes.
Humans?
Well, we should, but we don't have it anymore.
Really?
That's a clickbait title. I'm sorry.
Okay.
They have postulated we have lost the ability because we see it in birds. So it was a National Geographic one. Okay.
That we used to be able to inherently know if we were walking north, south, east, or west.
They postulated that, yes. Hang on.
Well, wouldn't that be a loss rather than a gain?
Yes.
I heard recently them deny that also, that we don't, quote, lose things.
Oh, we do. Okay, it didn't like my email address. Let me see if I can. They're being really obnoxious.
Humans cannot sense north, south, east, and west, but we can look at the sun. But again, you'd have to know something about the time of day.
We have postulated that we've lost the ability. But again, that was a clickbait title, so don't take it seriously.
But that was interesting in what you read. The article you read made the point that they can still see when there's no stars,
The
a
bird.
starless night.
Okay, here's the clickbait title. And I'm sorry that it's a clickbait title, but it's still a good article, if you know what I mean.
Of course
And I
not.
get all this pickpocket proof traveler. Okay, I get all these advertisements. I'm sorry. The CIA version of khakis. I'm sorry. Okay, humans have a magnetic sensor in our eyes, but can we detect magnetic fields? The answer is not really. We
We
suspected.
have a sensor?
We think it's disabled.
So for them to say we have one is actually not quite correct. They think that we have one.
It's a clickbait title, which means it's misleading.
Okay. Wow.
All right.
Deception is everywhere.
I hate clickbait titles. There's a reason we detest them. That's an example. There have been experiments where they do seem to think certain men have a better innate notion of north and south. So there may be traces of this. If other animals can sense north and south, it suggests if we may have had that ability at one time. We've lost, genetic deterioration. We've lost so many capabilities.
Well, and looking at ancient man, I wouldn't doubt it.
Okay, so there you go. So there are experiments that explore this. So many birds have a compass in their eyes. This is the one I was looking for. It's actually National Geographic. The retinas are loaded with a protein called cryptochrome, which is sensitive to the Earth's magnetic fields. It's possible that the birds can literally see the fields. I'm going to mute Cindy, or you could turn down your speaker a little bit.
Sorry, babe.
All right, maybe down to 75%. Okay, that's perfect now. It's possible that the birds can literally see these fields overlaid on top of their normal vision. This remarkable sense allows them to keep their bearings when no other landmarks are visible. So this is like flying through stormy skies on a dark night. That means they probably also have an altimeter, which is pretty cool. A barometric.
Wait. What's an altimeter? Is that where they see their altitude?
Yep. So when I'm flying, when a pilot is flying in instrument conditions, he can tell how high he is off the sea level.
Oh my gosh, that's a whole nother dimension.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. They have to have a map. They have to have a clock. They have to have an altimeter. They have to have magnetic sensing.
Yeah.
And that's probably not even all. There's probably 10 more that we can't even list.
They probably have also the ability to they're able to integrate star data, star and sun data to create their maps. They can supplement it. There's also been experiments to that effect. This is.
But then they're able to do it when there's no stars in the sky.
Yeah, you see in old navigation, when pilots are learning how to navigate, they have multiple means of arriving at the same destination because some of your navigation systems can be disabled. The most important is really your visual. But what happens if you're flying in instrument conditions? Instrument conditions means you can't see.
Okay, so it's basically planning for failure of one system. It's a backup.
Yes, and also, right. And it may not be that it fails, it just is not usable. So what happens when you're flying through a cloud? I mean, the next time if you're in an airplane, they fly through a cloud, just appreciate that the pilot is able to fly his airplane when he can't see. That's pretty impressive. People used to die before. I mean, sadly, pre-GPS, pre-radio navigation, were times when they didn't have navigation they would just die. I mean, it's just sad. I read these and my heart just breaks. I mean, what's so easy for us these days, Salman. Salman. Um, my heart just breaks. I mean, these people would die. But the birds have a lot of this inherent ability. Sadly, the thing they don't have is they don't know how to avoid hitting one of those wind turbines that are wind generators. A lot of them kill the birds because
Now, that doesn't make any sense because they have the ability to see that they're not going to hit that mountain. They're not going to hit that tree. So what is it with the wind turbines?
I guess they expect a tree to be stationary, and the wind turbine looks like a moving tree. They just process it that way.
Well, and it's intermittent. The blade is only there intermittently. It's there and then it's not there. It's there and then it's not there.
Yeah.
Oh, how sad.
Yeah. So the California laws mandated more wind turbines, and then it started killing the birds, and they said we have to shut the wind turbines down. So that's California for you. Anyway, sorry, that was totally as an aside. But yes, so let's go on with this article here. But cryptochrome isn't unique to birds. It is an ancient protein with versions in all branches of life. In most cases, these proteins control daily rhythms. Humans, for example, have two cryptochromes, CRY1 and CRY2, which help control our body's clocks. But Lauren Foley from the University of Massachusetts Medical School has found that CRY2 can double as a magnetic sensor. Foley worked with Drosophila flies, which can normally sense magnetic fields using cryptochrome. You can show this by placing them in an artificial magnetic field and training them to head in a specific direction in search for food. Normal flies can do this easily. Mutants that don't have the Cry gene, which makes the cryptochrome protein, lose their ability to find their meal. California literally means caliphate. To restore their internal compass, Foley simply has to give the mutant flies extra copies of CRY. But she found that the human version of the gene works just as well. When she loaded her mutant flies with the human CRY, which is kind of gross, they transplant human genes into a fly, she found that they could sense magnetic fields like their normal peers. Foley also found that human cryptochrome is sensitive to blue light. It only managed to restore the magnetic sense of flies when they were bathed in this color. These simple experiments show that human cryptochrome can act as a magnetic sensor. This does not mean that it does, much less that humans can sense magnetic fields. Plugging human cryptochrome into an alien environment like the body of a fly tells you very little about what it does in its native surroundings. Ross, with Wiltschko, one of the scientists who first discovered magnetic sense in birds, says, to sense the magnetic field, one does not only need a molecule like cryptochrome, but also an apparatus that picks up the changes in that molecule and mediates it to the brain. Drosophila obviously has this apparatus, but humans, I have my doubts. Now that's fair. Stephen Reppert, who led the new study, let me just increase the size of this, excuse me, make this a little bigger.
In other words, you have to have not just something that can sense the magnetic field, but something that can interpret the data.
Yes, and connect. I mean, there's a lot. It's not just one piece, correct. Drosophila obviously has this apparatus, but humans, I have my doubts. Stephen Reppert, who led the new study, is also cautious. However, he notes CRY2 is heavily active in the human retina. It's beautifully poised to sense light, but we don't know if it has the downstream pathways that communicate magnetic information to the brain. The possibility exists, and I would just say we may have lost that ability. The Connections between light, cryptochrome, and a magnetic sense were laid out by Klaus Schulten and Thorsten Ritz in 2000 in a bravura paper that united biology and quantum physics. They suggested that when cryptochrome is struck by blue light, it transfers one of its electrons across to a partner molecule called FAD. Electrons normally waltz around in pairs, but thanks to the light, cryptochrome and FAD now have lone electrons. They are known as a radical pair. Electrons also have a property called spin. In a radical pair, the spins of the two solo electrons are linked. They can either spin together or in opposite directions. These two states have different chemical properties. The radical pair can flip between them, and the angle of the Earth's magnetic field can influence these flips. In doing so, it can affect the outcome or the speed of the chemical reactions involving the radical pair. This is one of the ways in which Earth's magnetic field can affect living cells. It explains why the magnetic sense of animals like birds is tied to vision. After all, cryptochrome is found in the eye, and it's converted into a radical pair by light. Several experiments in the past few decades have supported Schulten and Ritz's theory. Foley's work also seems to fit. Human cryptochrome can support a magnetic sense in flies in a way that depends on blue light. But also Wilczko thinks that using the human protein is a red herring. All cryptochrome should be light sensitive, and since they form radical pairs, they should be sensitive to magnetic fields. The authors are describing intrinsic properties of cryptochrome. Using cryptochrome is a nice gag. Indeed, Ruppert says, of all the cryptochromes one would think of, the human one seemed the most interesting. We thought that if it did work, it might reignite some interest in the magnetoreception in humans, which has been waned down to virtually nothing. That means it's genetically deteriorated. Can humans sense magnetic fields? The current consensus is that humans cannot sense magnetic fields. Birds can do it, as can bats, turtles, ants, mole rats, sharks, rays, and more. That's why we think humans must have had it. I mean, look at all these creatures that do. Recently, Czech scientists have suggested that foxes, cows, and deer also have the same ability. But look at all the recent reviews in this field, and you'll see very little mention of our own species. A decade ago, a German group showed that our vision is slightly more sensitive in some directions than others, but the results have not caught on. It wasn't always like this. In the 1980s, Robin Baker from the University of Manchester carried out a series of experiments which seemed to show that humans could sense magnetic fields. He took busloads of blindfolded volunteers on winding journeys for several kilometers before asking them to point their way back home. They did so more often than expected. If they wore magnets on their heads, their accuracy dropped. The results were published in Science.
I'd have to see proof of that.
Yeah. Okay. So I don't think the consensus is we don't have very good magnetic perception. Virtually zero. Okay. But we do see it in birds. That's undeniable.
Well, not just birds, but you listed a whole ton of other animals. Sharks.
Well, they have a good way of figuring this out. If you put the magnet on their head and they suddenly lose their navigation ability, that's really good indication they're relying on the geomagnetic field of the Earth.
You're saying that a magnet on their head can mess with their system?
I'm pretty sure it would. We would have to read it, but that would make sense, right? You know how they first determined the relationship of electricity and magnetism, how they detected it?
No.
The first primitive battery, they ran it and they noticed the compass would point a certain way when you connect.
Wow.
It was conducted by Ørsted. And so this was our first connection of connecting magnetism with electricity. Those were the first tentative steps. And that's very providential. Who would think to have a compass? Maybe that was accidental.
I bet it was.
Isn't that amazing?
Yes.
So this led to more experiments like Faraday, and he made the connection even stronger. And that ends up being the third there are 4 equations of Maxwell's equations, Maxwell Heaviside version. The third one is Faraday's magnetic induction. It relates the magnetic field to the electric changes in an electric field, or vice versa. I could be wrong. Changing B field creates an electric field, something like that. I'm embarrassed. I should know that. Let me just briefly.
Because the electromagnetic field on the magnetic field on the planet Earth is not going to be affected by electromagnetic.
Okay. Ooh, what was that? We got some feedback. Okay, so I'm going to show, Maxwell's equation. This is the third equation, the Faraday law of induction. A changing magnetic field creates a curl in the electric field. Okay. I'm embarrassed because I'm learning this. Okay, do you remember
B stands for some kind of a measurement of the magnetic field?
Correct. E is the electric field.
And what is that upside down E? This lowercase upside down E. No, not that one. Keep going down. It could be a D. Is that a delta? No. The triangle.
Oh, no, that is okay. This is called it's an upside-down delta. Sometimes I think we call it a nabla, I think.
Okay.
And when you take the nabla and an X, that is called the cross product. So that's like a cross. That's a cross product. And that when you take the nabla and a cross, that's called a curl. And I had a little picture of this is kind of cute. Let me just show it to you.
Wait, what is that other character on the other side of the equal sign? That
is a partial derivative. This is vector calculus, multivariate calculus.
That's a lowercase d and it stands for derivative?
It's more like a backward 6.
Right.
And that's just, they wanted to create a symbol that wasn't a letter. So they called it's a partial.
Okay, so it represents what about the magnetic?
The magnetic field is changing over time.
Yeah, that's kind of like delta. Delta means change over, doesn't it?
Yes.
Okay.
So this was in our debate. We said, this is real science. And it's just incredible. I'm going to have maybe a show on this. We would not have the modern world if we weren't able to apply what this equation represents.
Yeah.
Engineers don't actually use these equations explicitly, but these equations represent what we do. So with the changes in the electric field, with the changes of the current moving through the wire, it created the magnetic field, it changed the compass. So it stands to reason how we got to this. Can you turn down your speaker just a tad? Oh, okay, that's one way to do it. When, that's better, just if you can mute. So what you can do then is to, if you put a magnet on some of these creatures, in principle, it should really mess up their magnetic navigation. That's why also in airplanes, because there's a lot of electrical equipment, you have a magnetic compass sitting on top of your kind of what the
dashboard,
kind of like a dashboard. When you turn on the airplane, there's a lot of electricity flowing. You have to make a magnetic correction. They have to actually make some measurements to see the effect of all. When you cut on your equipment, how many degrees off your magnetic compass is. and it's placarded there to say, okay, when you're running the airplane, the magnetic compass will be affected by this many degrees. So thankfully, it's not a huge amount of effect, but you can make a very, very strong electromagnet if you wanted to, or even a permanent magnet that could be strong enough to really throw off your compass.
Wow.
All you have to do is just put it in the vicinity. So I'm presuming this is how I thought I read there, one of the experiments they did is just put the magnet on some of these creatures, and it messed up. And then also with the flies, the fruit flies, they were using magnetic navigation to find their food. All they had to do is just kind of make an artificial north, and the fly would be able to use the magnet to navigate to their food. These are very interesting experiments, and they're able to identify the gene involved. They had to guess because there are thousands of genes inside the fly. They'll say, let's compromise this one and see if they can still navigate to the food, and they couldn't. So this is really hard. This is what I call real science. I mean, they are not, they're making some really good educated guesses and following through with experiments. And so this is why I like this area, because it combines optics, electrical engineering, magnetism, electricity, quantum mechanics,
And biology.
Yeah. This is, I mean, like I said, I shared this in front of the class for my class presentation. And students stood up in front of the class and said, makes it hard to believe this all evolved.
Dang straight.
What are you going to say? Because these are sophisticated. These are, again, this is like the graduate level, and they knew this is not trivial. They knew enough that this is not trivial to build a system like that.
This is what the Lord wants us to do when we see his creation.
Right. This is why, okay, this is my brand of creationism. You don't hear me talking about dinosaur fossils, chimp human ancestry, all this other stuff. This really delivers it home. And like you said, Dr. Martin reminds you of that. And so, yeah, we are like-minded, except I bring it down also to the molecular. He has kind of the broad description that's very good for a general audience. I'll take that and take it to a graduate level audience, but he has reached many souls this way.
Basically, it's standing in awe of the Lord's ingenuity.
Yes. This is why I hate some of these debates and the creationists get snookered. And I didn't like the modern day debate format where you have a free conversation. You could be just interrupted and the guy can try to interrupt you and say, you didn't answer my question. And like, no, because the stuff I said supersedes it. And it just, it's not, it's a way, it gives them an easy way to disrupt your flow of thought that you're trying to communicate.
Which I hate.
Right. So that being said, you and I have been invited to a discussion by some people. When we show up, this is the way that we can talk about this. We're just going to have to say, I'm afraid, let's just assume we have common ancestry, common descent. Look at, even if you assume that, look at the miraculous way this is constructed. This is the way. This is why I wanted to assume, for the sake of argument, common ancestry, because then we don't get bogged down in a short debate format. We can share the wonders of biology, and you can't help but think thoughts of God.
I'll give you that.
I'll give you that. I think maybe Matt Bilbue, the guy who became a Christian after studying cell biology, he may suspect there's common descent, but he's in a lot better state now So common descent doesn't mean it evolved naturally. He may still be wrestling with that because he's working with William Lane Craig, who kind of leans toward evolution a little bit. But you can't run away from the design. Paley's watch. It's very powerful. This is Michael Behe's argument. Michael Behe believes in common descent nominally. He said, I could take it or leave it, but that's not my focus. My focus is on the complexity.
Bailey's watch.
Are you familiar with Paley's watch?
Oh, Paley's watch.
Yeah.
I'm only familiar in that I've heard atheists slam it.
Yeah. Okay.
Is that
Well,
like the watchmaker? Blind
yes, the watchmaker. The seeing watchmaker is Paley's watch. The blind watchmaker is Richard Dawkins' atheistic natural selection substitute. And it doesn't work.
There's no way a blind person could make a watch.
Yes. So, but he wrote a book and it was a big bestseller and it's the basis of atheism, a lot of atheism. He was the messiah of atheism. And he charges $500,000 if you want to have breakfast with him.
Well, and basically his technique is to take our best argument and dismiss it.
Yep. Okay, so
that
now
basically it renders it
right.
powerless, but it's still our best argument. Not our best. It's still a dang good argument.
Yeah. So now you're seeing kind of my brand of creationism. I'm glad you're enjoying it. We're going to take kind of like Joe Martin's approach, but then we're going to take it to the molecular and cell level. It's just adding the important layer. That'll really give it force at the graduate level. I mean, it's great that Dr. Martin can share these videos and people say God did it. But then I can go to graduate students and say, okay, now here are some details. And it only took me 5 minutes. And a fellow classmate said, when I ponder this, it's hard to believe this evolved.
Mm-hmm.
In front of the dean of our school.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
She was struck. I mean, what happens when you see the power of God? You want to get on your knees and worship.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, it's like there's a power greater than myself, a mind that's beyond anything I've ever comprehended.
Yeah. I just keep getting the word awe.
Mm-hmm. I stand in awe of you. It's one of my favorite Christian songs.
Yeah.
So now, this 2 hours that we've been doing this, it's been valuable in that I feel like I have given you a taste of where molecular arguments can go. They can be done in a way that can be exciting and awe-inspiring. What helped, now I gave my class presentation toward the end of the semester. All of us had to do class presentations. So remember, they've had a lot of cell biology at that point, and they're knowing the complexity of the cell. And then I point this out, and they're just like, wow. That classmate was like, wow. So I'm glad you can say wow at this level. But when you actually study all the process to make this, you're going to go even more wow. So think of this as we've kind of gone kind of the reverse order of how we did it in my class, where this was at the end, where we talked about the bird magnetic navigation. We can work our way back to all the parts. So one of the things that was featured here is proteins. So why don't we wrap up in about 10 minutes and then we can, now that we've had a good conversation, I can refer to the example of magnetic bird navigation and cryptochrome. But we'll work backward and do molecular biology that way. So we can go from the very large system and then work backward. So if we're making our anti-evolutionism handbook, this is probably the opening example because I can relate it to the classroom. See, isn't this more fun than baraminology? Sorry to take a swipe.
Yeah, it's more awe-inspiring.
Isn't it better than
You
arguing
should
over?
play that song before we go
Uh,
as the
I
close.
I stand, I stand. Okay, I don't know. We'll clear copyright, but we could probably sing it.
Uh-oh. I think it would be more of a blessing not to sing it, but to play it. Maybe we could just direct everybody to go look it up yourself.
Well, I'll find out. I have a channel where I can clear copyright and find out if we're cleared to post it, because it is beautiful. So thank you for the suggestion. Maybe we'll close shows that way if we can get through it, or we can get a non-copyrighted version of I stand in awe of you.
And there's some Bible verses about in awe of thy, and there's one in awe of thy word, but there's probably some in awe of thy works.
Yeah, I'll declare your mighty works. It says it in the Psalms many times. And so people have been so much in the mode of debating creation evolution, they forget a lot of it is just declaring God's work, and you don't need to argue.
Mm-hmm.
You'll keep coming back because you find reasons to worship God by the things that are made. And it has helped me through a troubled times when we see all the miserable things happening in the world. You have
How I knew there was a God from the time I was a child.
Yeah. So, as it says in Romans, they suppress the truth in unrighteousness. And, God is evident enough that if you look, you'll find him, but he's hidden enough that if you want to close your eyes, he'll make it really easy. He makes it really easy for people to turn away.
I don't know about that, Sal. I think he goes to extensive measures to try and hunt us down. Not in a bad way, but the hound of heaven is what I've heard him referred to.
Well,
Once he seeks us, but
it says in the Bible, the way to life, the gate is narrow and the path is hard.
That's true.
You will find it. And he uses the word. And then it says in Matthew 11, I think, let me check that.
Yeah, you're right.
Matthew 11:25. And Jesus said it. And at that time, Jesus says, I praise you, Father, Lord of heaven and earth, that you have hidden these things from the wise and intelligent and revealed them to little children.
I think with things that are hard to understand like that, where we try and make it into an either or, it's actually a both. I think there are times when he hides and there are times when he screams.
Yes. So in Paul's life, he had the road to Damascus experience, but prior to that, he was in darkness.
I'm looking for a verse. He gives drink to every beast of the field. He causes the grass to grow for the cattle, herbs for the service of man, that he may bring forth food out of the earth, wine that makes glad the heart of man, oil to make his face shine, bread to strengthen his heart, trees full of sap. Basically, that's just telling me he's going out of his way to make us see how much he loves and provided for us, which is kind of the opposite of intentionally hiding, which seems theologically objectionable. So again, I guess there's a time when he's making himself evident and a time when he's hiding. And if he's hiding, it's only for one reason, and that's because he has showered us with blessings and we've rejected him. It's kind of like with Pharaoh. He did all those miracles to show Pharaoh, and then when Pharaoh kept hardening his heart, then God hardened his heart.
Well, we can talk about that also at another time.
Yeah,
But let's just cover in our closing moments. Let's just cover briefly the central dogma, and we'll revisit it. So I feel like you've come on board a little bit to emphasize this, but you also gave me good ideas for the anti-evolutionism handbook that I hope you'll help me write.
yeah, we had fun editing together.
Yeah, maybe we can put something together, make a booklet. A 40-page booklet is achievable. I don't want these 200-page things. Otangela wrote something like 500 pages or so. It's like, another way to do that is to write 10 books that are 40 pages long.
Or take 10 pages, reread it several times, and make it more succinct.
So we can play with it, but I want to make the anti-evolutionism handbook. The reason is I'm not happy with the way creationists are arguing. We have an opportunity to fill a niche there. We're all other creationists. I mean, if you just watch how they debate, I'm just like...
The original evolution handbook that ICR sold, I think Kent sells Carl Bass sells. Obviously it sells a lot, so basically it would be a newer version.
We can do it. We can do it better. And especially now that we have the internet.
Updated. Maybe just anyway, yeah. I hate to make it so that we have to make theirs lesser.
Oh no, that's the nice guy in you.
Yes.
Kill that. You see, I don't know. Among guys, it's natural you expect them to be competitive. And I'm going to be better than you. And that's okay.
It's okay. Go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Let me grab something from my library. I need to show you this.
Shame on him. Yeah, remember I was telling you that before. My first exposure in the 1989 to ICR arguments, they were very compelling. And then in 2016, when I went to Dinosaur Adventureland, that's 30 years later. And I was shocked to discover how many of our arguments they had supposedly rebutted. Not that they're good rebuttals, but they have that anti-creation. They have that's what that place in Berkeley is all about.
Well, I got to tell you, sometimes they had a point.
Maybe.
You
I don't
see,
know.
well, no, but the thing is, it's a good iteration because if they make a criticism and you can adjust, then they can't make that criticism again. So I'm just like telling creationists, why don't you just learn from your critics and you come out with better arguments? At some point, they're going to be like James Tour.
Well, but like they keep saying irreducible complexity is a bad argument, and it's a really good argument. It's just that we can't say that word. It's too complicated. We have to put it in simpler language, like what you were saying about it all or nothing.
It's a good heuristic for finding good arguments. There's a subtlety there, and we haven't adjusted. So I'm going to suggest we use the word unevolvable complexity. What are you going to say then? They'll say, prove it. I'll say, but here's a suggestion. How about that quantum spin sensing in the bird's eye? Do you think that can evolve? I'm just going to postulate it's unevolvable.
Unevolvable complexity?
Yeah.
I think you just coined a new term. Isn't that basically what Joe Martin called his series, Creation That Defies Evolution?
Yes. But you see, okay, there's a rhetorical trick that the Darwinists have used. They called it natural selection. One, people accept that what they described as natural, and it's not. It's fantasized. They got away with making a premise sound like it's the real thing. It's a very misleading term.
They do that all the time.
Because evolutionism is based on faith and unwholesome rhetoric and illogical arguments.
Wow, Sal.
Do you know why I study the rhetoric? Because I've gotten to see real sciences. Electrical engineering is an example. The development, as I was telling you how we developed electrical engineering theory, how do you think we figured out how to make generators? Where you take a wire going through a magnetic field and it creates electricity. It was a long path to discovery. And it started with that experiment by Ørsted.
But they sure don't know that their arguments are based on illogical rhetoric. And the people that they delude obviously don't know either. But that's the one thing about all that Aaron Ross stuff is I found his arguments completely stupid.
Yeah. So,
and yet he considers them demonstrably unfalsifiable or something like that.
Yeah. So I'm going to suggest irreducibly complex is a heuristic. That means it's a filter for finding good examples of unevolvable complexity. And what I mean by that is the only way that it can be countered is with faith assertions. It's complex enough that they can only use faith assertions. They cannot actually use experiments and actual data.
And they're going to say that, well, just because we don't know how it evolved doesn't mean therefore God.
And that's a faith statement. That's an assumption on their part. Because,
well,
maybe it's not a faith statement, but first off, that change, this is just obfuscation because but it does mean, okay, they'll say that doesn't mean there's God, but I'll say, well, it does mean evolutionism is not based on science because I don't know is not a scientific explanation. Yes. I don't think we don't know is not a scientific claim. I'm sorry. It's not a scientific thing to say we don't know is not a scientific theory. Evolutionism is based on we don't know, but we believe, but we don't want to admit we believe. That's evolutionism.
It's what you were saying before. We don't know the reagents. We don't know the process.
We don't know the product.
Well, we can see the product is this complex thing.
Well, I just let's say, okay, what was the common, okay, what was the ancestor of, like, say, Tupoisomerase? Why don't you give us a description? I said, that's the beginning point. You can't even describe what the ancestor of that protein family is. You can't even describe what it looks like. That's what I meant by you don't even know the product to get to that step. Why don't you describe the ancestor? And that's one thing you can do at the molecular level. You can force them and say, okay, describe the sequence. You're making the claim it descended from this sequence. All the members of that family describe the sequence.
And the other argument you were making is it's not an argument
From ignorance.
from ignorance, it's an argument from probability.
Argument by contradiction. It's contradicted.
Right.
Okay, so probability is a good way of saying it, but you could also say contradiction. Like if I said, I don't know how a tornado can pass through a junkyard and build a 747, that sounds like an argument from ignorance. But what you say is a tornado will not pass through a junkyard and make a 747 or any thing of comparable complexity. That's an argument by contradiction. It will not because, and you can list all the reasons why. Like you need to have parts of the right complementary shape. And even if you add all the parts, to quote James Tour, I'll give you that. Do you think a tornado can take all the parts and assemble and connect it in the right way?
In a functioning whole.
Right.
Somebody needs to know in their head in advance what the functioning whole is going to be.
Right.
And what parts are needed to
create
that.
Right. It's contradicted. We know at the chemical level, the origin of life is subject to the problems of all these disorganizing, these randomizing forces or processes. We know experimentally and also theoretically. And then now it's getting to the point, even for evolved organisms, the disorganizing processes of random mutation do not build up complexity. We had experimented in laboratories that used radiation, thinking that we could apply more mutation and we'd accelerate evolutionary change. That idea didn't last very long.
You know what, honey? That brings up a brilliant point. If 90% of the mutations are destructive and 10% are supposedly, improving,
it's that more like
still got 9 against 1.
1, right? And the other thing is, okay, let's say you improved your ability to run, but let's say you got dumber, your vision got worse, your kidneys don't function as well. You start to get subject to allergies. And I'm just like, okay, this is what 9-to-1 odds will get you.
Exactly.
Collectively.
9 losses and 1 gain. You're not going to go from an amoeba to a human.
That is one thing that was borne out by genetic entropy. And you can make very good arguments. That's the population genetics. You actually articulated a fundamental principle of population genetics. It takes a lot of formalism to actually deliver home in a mathematically rigorous way, but that's fundamentally the problem. So quote unquote natural selection isn't natural, neither is it selection. It is misleading, it's a misnomer. It doesn't really happen in nature as Darwin envisioned. There's only differential reproductive abundance, and usually the abundance you get are defective organisms. And we have papers now that show that. Lenski's paper in 2017 with lead author Kochi said, the genome decays despite fitness, which is reproductive success. The genome decays despite fitness gains. And I'm like, yeah, that looks pretty bad for Darwinian selection.
So what he's saying basically is the 9 still happen even if you get the 1.
Well, you end up, the 9 still happen and you get more of it. You get defective genomes. So this is also why we believe human intelligence is decreasing, because very intelligent women are childless. 25% of them have no children. And there are a variety of reasons for that. One of them is something that's very innate in male and female relationships. The male wants to feel that he can provide, that he has something of value to give to the girl. And so he has to be on a higher social standing than the girl. If she's above him in social standing, which also means especially intelligence in our society, he will feel intimidated, and the girl will be also less likely to pick him. Whereas the gap between a male of high social standing and also high intelligence, he'll choose people beneath him. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. It's just the way that it happens. So you'll see these, I knew this doctor. She was attractive, very, very attractive, very intelligent, very accomplished. No guy wanted to date her. They were just intimidated away. And
that brings up a really good point, that even if you've got the 1 out of 10,
yes,
you still
have to reproduce it.
Assume that it's going to pass down to the next generation. A lot of mutations don't.
Yes, and that's population genetics. And a lot of biologists, only a select few biologists are good enough at math to do population genetics. Very few. Engineers, since they're very, they have to do math, they feel very comfortable going into that field and feeling, they can mix it with the other side because, engineers are math savvy too. And we can compete in that space. And one thing we found is the field has a lot of flaws in it. Not only that, the field has a lot of flaws that they've admitted to. You just have to find their confessions. They've actually had enough integrity to say this doesn't work.
That's interesting. I was going to say evolutionists appear to lack math savvy.
Yes. Now, do you remember in the debate, one of the opening things that we showed was, what's wrong with evolutionary biology? There's a paper. And there's a lot of that when we analyze the math. In an honest moment, we'll say there's a problem here. They will at least clear the conscience, put it in publication, and then it gets buried and no one reads it.
What was it? It's more akin to
phrenology than to physics.
Yeah, phrenology. And phrenology is the study of...
It's a pseudoscience that studies the shape of the skull and the character of a person. So someone with a certain skull type will be like a liar or whatever, something like that.
AKA ridiculous, unscientific.
I mean, I thought it was worth looking into, but they have discredited it empirically.
Yeah.
So where were we? This has been a great conversation. Would you like to try to do this again next Saturday night or sooner? Okay, so I'm going to give you an opportunity to talk about your legal case and your GoFundMe. I promised you at the end of this, I donated a small amount, and I'm going to give my pitch for you. But let's just cover a little bit of molecular biology, and then this is where we end on this is where we'll start next time.
Okay. Yeah, you can just go ahead and put the link, and they can see the video that explains the GoFundMe by clicking on the link.
Yes, I already did that. And so if you just type in central dogma of biology, it'll get you to the central dogma of molecular biology. There are various ways that this is represented.
Tell me what to type in again. You blinked out a little bit.
Just type in central dogma biology.
Oh, yeah.
And it's actually the central dogma of molecular biology. Yeah. And so it is. You have DNA that is...
Can I read it? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Well, an approximation of this, DNA is the blueprint of proteins. DNA provides the blueprint for proteins. That's the inexact way, but that's one way to start thinking about it. DNA is a blueprint of proteins. You might say it's a recipe, okay?
Or the instruction manual. And I've heard atheists say, it's not an instruction manual, but it's not a code. Well, it sure as heck is. I saw Cy Gart has one that says, yes, it is.
Well, you don't have to go there. You just have to say the sequence of DNA is used to code the protein. Is the organization controls the sequence of DNA controls the sequence of the protein. So you don't have to get into the code, no code argument. You can just say the sequence of DNA provides, dictates.
Instructions. Instructions.
And you don't have to use the word instruction. It will just describe the sequence of proteins. It controls the sequence of proteins. Instruction is, you can use that word, but if you want to avoid any, since they like to play semantic games, you could say, okay, what word is acceptable to you? The sequence of protein depends on the sequence of DNA. Is that okay? Can you just say
They do like to play semantic games.
Of course, that's their whole defense. That's the basis. That's all they have. This is what you do when you don't have actually any evidence.
And I just
You have to be a lawyer.
Works. Yeah.
How do you think some of these criminals are able to get through the legal system even when all the facts are against them? It's semantic games.
Yep.
Just lawyer your way around it.
That was the exact thing I was thinking about at the beginning of the show when we were talking about the dismissing.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. So we're going to cover this more, but just an easy way to begin. Okay, this isn't the most accurate. It won't get you through the exam, but it's an easy way to communicate it, and it's a good starting point when you're trying to remember it. The sequence of protein depends on the sequence of DNA. How about that?
What Wiki says is DNA makes RNA and RNA makes protein.
Okay, but what's an easier way to, I'm just giving you a starting point. The sequence of amino acids in the protein depends on the sequence of nucleotides in the DNA. But the sequence of the protein depends on the DNA. Or you could just say the protein depends on the DNA.
Yeah. No Tiki, no Lonely.
Say that again. No
Tiki, no Lonely.
What does that mean? No Tiki?
No ticket, no laundry. If you don't have the DNA, you're not going to get the protein. So don't tell me it's not an instruction manual. One is dependent upon the other.
Right. The protein depends on the DNA. Okay. And then when we get into the central dogma, we'll fill in all the details. But just think of that and we'll fill in the details.
This is another interesting way they put it. The central dogma is an explanation of the flow of genetic information.
Yeah.
It is information.
Yeah.
And it does flow.
Yes. But remember, if you're in a debate, or let's say you're not in a debate, let's say you're in a discussion with atheists, they're going to play semantic games, and there's a counter. Don't get into the semantic games and say, okay, let's just not use the word information. We can just say the sequence of the protein depends on the DNA. Do you have a problem with that? Because there's obviously a relationship here, and there's obviously textbook central dogma molecular biology. If you don't like the wording, give your own wording, but it's still the same, you still have a problem there. How did this evolve?
The sequence of the DNA produces the sequence of the protein.
Right. Okay.
The sequence of the nucleotides in the DNA produces the sequence of the amino acids in the protein?
Yes,
Yay!
there you go. And we'll just study it in more detail. And then at some point, if you really want to be a formalist about it, you can use the word definition. But I like in Dr. Tan's molecular biology class, all she requires is you just be able to draw. You can draw the central dogma. You could see they have it here. You can just say DNA to RNA to protein, or you could just draw these arrows here. The important one is DNA and take transcription, translation, protein. Now there are some exceptions here. We have these other arrows, but you can omit that when you're just beginning. Okay, so we can have the simpler. There are probably simpler versions of this. Where here's one. Here's the simple version, or here's the simplest version right there. And they're more sophisticated ones, but this is the simple version. So we might say that that's kind of the high school level, where you just have these two arrows. The more sophisticated.
Maybe that's why they say that DNA is not a code, because it appears that the mRNA is actually the code.
No, it's a semantic game.
Okay. And James Tour brings out this amazing point that it's just the code. It's not the actual thing. It's like having information on a flash drive, but not having. Can you help me?
Yes, it's the medium for the information. And so this is what I try to get on the creationists. I said, don't get into these semantic games. You're going to get in trouble. Don't argue it. Just use, if their definition, if the opponent's definition is good enough, work with that. So what James Tour is saying, and what I've tried to say, is that DNA is the medium for the information. You might, he said, it's not the actual code itself or something like that. I don't remember. It's the medium. It's not the message itself. So you can actually see that in this diagram. Oh, hello, Peter.
Hi, Peter.
Yeah. So what's the message? The message is, what's the amino acid sequence? Well, the message first is stored on DNA in nucleotides, then it goes to the mRNA in terms of RNA, ribonucleotides. So these are deoxyribonucleotides. These are ribonucleotides.
So basically the process from DNA to mRNA is the addition of oxygen? No.
It is this, no, you're close. The RNAs have, okay, you're close. RNA, DNA. You're very close. See if they have.
And ribo, I think, is sugar, right?
Okay, this is what you're talking about here. Let's look at it here. Ribo has the oxygen, deoxyribose does not.
So deoxyribose is DNA and ribose is RNA.
Is the nucleotide for RNA. Deoxyribose is the nucleotide for DNA. So when you take several deoxyribose nucleotides, string them together, you make DNA. You make the acid by the polymer. A polymer, a single thing is called a monomer. And when you bring them together like beads on a string, it's a polymer. Mer meaning the number. I don't know how they came up with the term number. So the monomer is the deoxyribose molecule. And then when you string them together, all these monomers together, they make a polymer. The polymer is the acid.
Now you're blowing me away.
Yeah.
But basically, when we're talking about the dogma where DNA goes to RNA, it's an addition of oxygen.
Not quite.
Well, and it's also
Well, no, I'll tell you what happens is
the strand.
okay. Let me just. I'm gonna have to get copyright clearances on the videos, and you'll understand it. The DNA does not get doesn't get oxygen added to it. It stays DNA. What happens is you have an entire new polymer synthesized with ribonucleotides. So this remains.
So it's a copy machine that you're making a copy without harming the original.
Correct. And the copy has the added oxygen, and they call that process transcription. You're transcribing it from kind of one language to a slightly different language.
That's amazing because it's actually kind of like the creation of new stuff. You know how they say you can't create or destroy, but there has to be new stuff being created to make that copy.
Yes.
It's coming from somewhere.
You need a manufacturing process, and that's very complicated.
Wow. Absolutely stunning.
Let me see, RNA synthesis pathways. Let me see if I can even find the RNA synthesis pathway. I'll show you what the RNA synthesis pathway looks like. How do you like them apples?
So over on the left where it says gene looping, is that the DNA that it's using to make its copy?
Right. Oh, this is just brutal. This is the RNA. This is one of the RNA synthesis pathway.
And again, all of this is inside of a microscopic cell. So you've got microscopic within microscopic within microscopic.
Yeah, you have multiple layers. That's why the Stairway of Life will tell you how many layers there are. But the RNA synthesis pathway, let's see if I have this. We studied this in biochemistry. There was, let's see, there used to be metabolic pathways. Okay. Uracil cyto. Oh yeah, we used to have these diagrams here. This is some of the biochemistry involved in synthesizing like the cytosine. It's just nasty.
Synthesizing cytosine. Okay, basically that means creating it from the raw material of elements.
Right, metabolic.
You take elements like what you see there. The S, I believe, is sulfur.
I don't know, but let me show you a metabolic diagram where this is the Roche pathways. This is how we make all the biochemical. This is a diagram.
Got to be kidding me.
No, this is all that is needed. It took some of this created Nobel Prize work to be able to deduce I mean, this is just, and they say this is the simplified version. Um, and some of the metabolic pathways are even bigger. Let me see if we can get that one up. I mean, when I went to remember Joe DeWeese,
Yeah.
topoisomerase? I went to his office. He has diagrams like this pasted on his wall because he teaches biochemistry. And he said to pass your medical entrance exam, the MCATs, he said one way you can get through the biochemistry portion is to memorize this pathway, all the pathways. This generates like things like the sugars, the amino acids, the RNAs, DNAs. And this is just a fraction of it. I mean, my biochemistry.
So RNA includes sugars and acids.
RNA, yes. It includes the ribose sugar. It includes the nucleotides. I mean, the nucleobases, adenine, cytosine, guanine, adenine, cytosine, guanine, and uracil. And then it also includes phosphorus, the phosphate group. And this is, now we're getting deep into the biochemistry, but you'll just see.
But if you look at the molecules, basically they're just chemicals stuck together.
Yeah, but it's
The raw material has to be coming from somewhere, and they have to know how to assemble. Raw materials can assemble in a million different ways.
well, this is again, it's just like a recipe, but then you have basically a factory that. So I mean, you think about how you get your ingredients to make a cake. You need a factory to make the wheat, to grind it. You need a factory to purify the sugar. You need a factory to make the
Baking soda, cinnamon, cocoa, eggs, milk.
Right. So even with we had the biological raw materials, you still have all this processing to make all the ingredients. And this is what's happening here, except you really are making it sometimes from absolutely pure raw ingredients. So in the case of plants, okay, in the case of bacteria, they are making all these amino acids that, humans don't make all their amino acids. We have to get it from our foods. And so the first life would have to have the capacity to make all these amino acids. This is why I just say focus on abiogenesis and the biochemistry and the protein orchard. You're going to just make killer arguments. You can't run away from this. This is exactly why they would prefer to talk about the fossil record than to talk about this. And I want you to see something. Look at all the people that have been important in the intelligent design movement. They're engineers and biochemists. And the ones that are really winning the day to day are the chemists like James Tour. Because the arguments are so brutally obvious at this level.
Chemicals are going to do what chemicals do. Reactions, he was saying that they're like your friends. We know what they are going to do.
Right. So what he's basically saying is some basic things. It's like you have to purify, so you only have the ingredients that should be there. Otherwise, if you have other ingredients, you're not going to get the products that we end up with in life.
Well, and not only that, but it has to follow the recipe.
Right.
Because if you have a bunch of oxygen and a bunch of sulfur and a bunch of hydrogen, it can go in a million ways, and you have to have it in a precise configuration.
It has to be just like a recipe.
Exactly.
What it is, and he uses the word, it's going to gunk it up if you have all these contaminants. And this is known, and that's where he was objecting. He said, how are you going to get all this purification?
In other words, it would be like having a cake with pepper in it, or motor oil in your cake, or something.
All like sorts of poisons. Poisons is a good word for, and he was talking also, he said, Okay, in one phase you want magnesium, in the next phase you don't want it. How are you going to have that react? What do you do now? Because you can't live with it, you can't live without it. And the only way you get about that is you have to compartmentalize the reactions. So you have one reaction in one phase where you have these ingredients. In the next phase, you remove some ingredients, you add others. And actually, when we're synthesizing biomolecules from scratch in a human laboratory, that's exactly what we have to do. We have to compartmentalize the recipe. And you can actually see that in kind of a cooking process. You don't put it all in one pot if you have a complex recipe.
Like the frosting can't be mixed in with the cake.
Yes.
Basically, I'm sensing that this is a precise dictation and not a random process.
Exactly.
But what do we do with it when they say it's not random? Or that they're saying, yeah.
I'll tell you, okay, at the origin of life, all you have is chemistry. And you'll just say, okay, you said it's not random. Tell me what the ingredients were that started. Tell me the process.
And tell me the product.
Because
you don't know any of them? Okay, then that's a faith statement.
And remember, you see the complexity of this diagram? They might be able to barely get maybe one reaction, but then they have to account for all the others, and they're compartmentalized. That's going to be their problem. So if they say that it's not random, you don't have to use the word random. Just say demand. Okay, what were the steps? What were the ingredients? What was the process? What was the outcome? And how do you know that? Always ask, how do you know that? And if they say, I don't know, and you'll say, okay, that's fine. But that's not really a scientific theory, is it? I don't know doesn't count as a scientific claim.
I don't know doesn't count as I don't know
It's not a scientific theory.
See is the same as you believe something you didn't see.
Yeah. See?
Which is faith. Now that picture that you showed just a second ago, is that one nucleotide or one amino acid in a chain of 1 million of those?
No, these are the parts that make stuff that you can make nucleotides from.
This is the factory required to make a nucleotide, and then you have to take the nucleotide and put it in the right order.
Yes. Someone said he looked at this and he said, no, this can't evolve. This is exactly why you keep showing it to the next generation. If they have an open mind, they'll say only God can do this. This
is the factory you need to make one single stinking nucleotide?
No, it makes the raw materials that are used to make all sorts of other things. And I'd have to go back to my biochemistry, because the first thing is there's a lot where you have to make adenosine triphosphate. So first you're making things like pyruvate and all these other intermediate chemicals that are just to make the battery energy, so to speak, to power the creation of other things. It's not. I'd have to really go back to my biochemistry, and it was brutal. We can go through that at some point. I'm glad you're asking, and it will help you understand what James Tour is trying to say. The more of the chemistry you get under your belt. Now, the nice thing is you can learn a lot of it if you're willing to dedicate maybe the equivalent of 1 week.
The equivalent of 500 years at 500 hours a day.
No, you don't need that much. This is what
yeah.
you can go through a college program, and yes, they'll teach you, but then they'll teach you a lot that you don't absolutely need to understand the origin of life problem. They'll prepare you for medical school or to be a pharmacist or a chemist, but to understand it as far as the creation evolution controversy, I think a week of dedicated time will get you very far. And then at that point, it's at least good enough that you can distinguish. You'll have at least to know what websites to visit to encourage. And then if you have questions directed your way, you can kind of help explain to people what that describes. And at the very least, you can't be accused of saying you don't know what you're talking about. Because
I think that they will still say that. I think it
you can be accused.
I could
but
be
you can put
God
them-
Almighty, and they're still going to say I don't understand it.
Right. They still may say it, but it won't have as much force, right? Because if you show that you have knowledge, they can't argue that you actually know what you're talking about. Because the one thing that'll really get them is if you start to cite the page number of your textbooks. I've actually had to do that sometimes. I'll say this is molecular cell. This is essential cell biology, 5th edition. This figure.
I was thinking before we begin, we should find out what textbook would satisfy them.
Yeah.
If any.
So I mean, I happen to know that because I've had them. I had these were college textbooks. So.
Is there like one particular textbook that's used at all the reliable colleges?
No. There's competition for textbooks.
Yeah. But I would imagine some of this stuff is very, very similar across all of them. The dogma is going to be the same.
Codified. Yeah, it's codified in a lot of places. And if you want really good codification, you can just always go to Wikipedia and say, okay, do you have a problem with that? They'll say, oh, that's Wikipedia. But it's like, well, this is the one that, this is like the most common understanding. But it's like, okay, you tell me. What definition do you like? We'll still work with it. See, this is where you have enough knowledge that you can actually use their definition, and they'll still have a problem. Use whatever
what you mean is you
any definition you want. It's not going to solve the problem.
Yeah.
Because the problem is, what were the ingredients? What was the process? And what was the product?
And since you don't know, you are stating something you never saw.
Yep. And you have no proof of it, and you have no hope of having proof. That's even
Oh, well,
worse.
we're here, and so it happened.
But the issue is, it may have happened, but the question is, was it within natural? Did it happen?
Was it God or no God?
Right. So again, that's the law of large numbers. You can actually say, oh, it's all 500 coins heads, fair coins heads. But did that happen naturally?
No.
Yeah. That's how we know. And this is constructed with such high technology, we wouldn't know how to do this. So I hope you've been blessed seeing this at the molecular level. And I'm going to have to close it up because we're about 3 hours. Would you like to try to do this again next Saturday?
Yeah, let's pray it out.
Okay. So now, as we close out, I'd like to let the viewers know Cindi Lincoln is she's requesting some financial assistance to hire a lawyer to prosecute Kent Hovind on a violation of his restraining order. He has 3 restraining orders against him, and it's problematic.
No, 3 guilty. Yeah, that's not quite accurate. But
okay, guys, I'm going to let Cindi describe the situation, but let me say that I think there have been things committed against her that I think need to be brought to justice. But even beyond that, there are children at risk at Dinosaur Adventureland. Kent Hovind has publicly admitted he encouraged a registered sex offender pedophile, convicted pedophile, to come to Dinosaur Adventureland by the name of
With
Chris,
a child
with a child. Okay,
who
I-
is now saying that he was molested. And when he went to the police to report this molest, Kent Hovind, on recording in a voicemail to Brett Keane published this recording. It's Kent's own voice on my channel. He says that the boy is a moron for making the report and that we should just ignore him.
So this
If
is
you're
what.
not mad as heck, you're not paying attention. Sorry, Sal. I keep interrupting you.
No, so the point is, I'm very concerned for the children, and one way a stop can be put on this. This can be put to a stop is as if Kent Hovind can be thrown in jail for other crimes, it may lead to discovery of these other things, and we can put a stop to this. I'm concerned about the abuse that's happening to the children. So the case with this little boy, Zaire, that's also an open case, and we don't know where that's headed. The wheels of justice move very, very slowly. So we're trying to get justice for other things in the meantime, and maybe we can save kids from Dinosaur Adventureland by taking all these legal routes, because the wheels of justice turn very slowly. And sad to say, this shouldn't have even happened if we didn't have people claiming to be Christians and claiming to be creationists enabling all this behavior. If the entire creationist and Christian community said, enough of this, don't send your kids there, this would be all over. But they're not doing that. Instead, they're attacking Cindi Lincoln. They are defending all the stuff that's going on there at Dinosaur Adventureland.
They're full on saying I'm lying.
Yeah.
And that I'm crazy, or that I'm vindictive, or that I just wanted to take over the ministry and I'm having a little tissy fit because I couldn't get my way. Absolute ridiculous, ludicrous. So I have court on Tuesday, and it's very strange how the judge requested this, and I was told that I needed a lawyer, and I'm hoping that for just a one-time that he would look at the 45 pages of evidence that I presented, take him a couple hours, maybe appear with me on Tuesday, that just for those couple hours, maybe $900 would do it. So I was asking $3 times 300 viewers, and then I'd have my 900. I'd say I'm almost halfway there. And I did go ahead by faith, make an appointment with a lawyer on Monday. So if you want to view the 45 pages of evidence, that's what the GoFundMe video shows you, exactly what happened, how grievous it is.
Okay. Let me just say this. It's possible, because I've seen this process reasons why I would have seen this, because I'm not at liberty anymore to be talking too much about my legal issues publicly. Okay. So, but what ends up happening is sometimes a complaint is filed and the judge sometimes says, I don't think I'll accept it in its current form. I'll give you an opportunity to amend your complaint, to word it more correctly. And I'm anticipating that what the lawyer will do, he will request, it's like, Judge, can we file an amended complaint?
Yeah, that is what appears to be the case.
And what he's going to do, he'll say, Judge, what are the problems here? Can you give, so you're praying the judge will allow the refiling of an amended complaint. The lawyer will reword everything and say, okay, this is the better format. This is, up to legal judicial standards. It has a lot of what we really wanted to say, but thank you Judge, for giving us a chance to state this more clearly.
Yeah,
So,
there's some technicality going on, I believe, that I'm not aware of, which is why I needed the lawyer.
right. So I'm going to encourage you, when you talk to the lawyer, say, okay, can we ask the judge to give us a chance to make an amended complaint? Because it may be dismissed the way it is as written. So be sure to tell the lawyer, ask, is there a way we can request to make an amended complaint so that it's clear before the judge what the actual complaint is? And talk to the lawyer about that. So ask about an amended complaint, because they may be able to get a dismissal that on the way it is written, but you can negate that by saying, Judge, we would like a chance to file an amended complaint, and then the dismissal can happen. They can attempt a dismissal or demur after the complaint is amended. So this is the thing that you might request. You're going to have to go through a couple more iterations of that, but that might be your best chance. So it's good that it wasn't thrown out right away, because sometimes the judge can rule to dismiss even without the opposing counsel getting involved. And it appears that he's asking for a clarification. So it's good you can legal representation. So just keep remembering the word amended complaint.
I just wrote myself a note, hon.
Okay.
I mean, it's kind of like the classic, the guy clearly murdered the victim, but he's off on a technicality. This is not a murder. I'm not insinuating that. What I'm insinuating is that it was extremely grievous violations, plural.
Okay,
and it
so
appears that it's going to be released on a technicality, and that is infuriating.
unfortunately, that's just the way it is. So keep trying. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm not saying we will necessarily have legal success in this round, but there are so many things that there could be numerous other legal actions, not even involving Cindi. They could take the fight to what's going on to the children there.
Yeah.
So we're not limited to that. We, society as a whole, there are any number of other legal complaints from other parties, aggrieved parties, that can come forward.
And two more from me. I have another date, December 12th, and I have a third case that I really want to present. But again, I'm trying to sell some land so that I can. I mean, that one is going to be a $10,000 legal bill. This one is only going to be more like $900.
Okay. Do you want to talk about your December 12th one? You may not spend any money. This is the state of Alabama versus Kenthoven.
Exactly. December 12th, the state of Alabama is the prosecuting attorney, so I don't have to.
And what is, okay, right. So this is
the body slam.
Right. This is the domestic violence charge. And if it gets through, Kenthoven's going to jail.
Yes.
Yes.
And I'm actually hoping, I don't really know how this works, but as it stands right now, Kenthoven has a plan of perjury and false witnesses. And I would like to get him on perjury as well as domestic violence. Okay. It's outrageous how he actually has no problem lying to the public and to the judge. Okay. And I think that needs to be prosecuted. I think that he needs to get the maximum sentence because of that.
Okay.
And it's going to be a jury trial December 12, which means 12 jurors have to come to a unanimous agreement, I believe is how it works. If that's true, probabilistically, that's unlikely. I mean, for him not to have one lone juror just stick up for him because of some dumb reason,
Yep. So we can all hope and pray.
Please do.
Yes. For the kids' sake. For your sake too, but I'm just trying to
And for
let people
future
know.
victims. Yes, there's children involved. There's also, just like Aaron Ra said, Kent bilks old ladies of prayer donations. Okay, you're talking sacrificial giving from old ladies, from single women like myself, from God-fearing people who want to serve the Lord. And he squanders, he steals. It's outrageous. And he's hurting the volunteers that go there, thinking they're going to a godly ministry, and they find out they're going to be abused spiritually, emotionally, financially. Anyway,
Can you
he's,
do me a small favor, Cindy?
yeah.
Can you type something in the side chat? I'm going to make you a moderator. I need you to type just like hi Sal or happy Thanksgiving, and then I'm going to
Okay. Tell
when
me
I
how to find that.
there might be something where you can click where it says comments. Click on comments.
There was, let me exit the full screen. There's comments. Okay.
And then you could see it
But I
down
have
there.
to log in order to be able to access, if I'm not mistaken. Let's see. There's no place for me to leave a comment, only view.
Oh, okay.
I
Well,
can do it in the private chat. Okay.
um,
Testing.
well, unfortunately, I can't make you a moderator that way. Don't worry about it. I
Okay.
have put your GoFundMe on in the video description, but just for grins, I'll also put it in the side chat. No, I have your GoFundMe link. Hang on. Just guys, just go to the video description, but I'll dump it anyway in the side chat.
And if you can't figure it out, if you go to Cindi Link in YouTube, it's the newest video and it has the GoFundMe link on it. And I appreciate it very
Yeah.
much.
So when did you start requesting this? When did you publish this? How long ago?
Only a few days ago.
And you've already gotten almost $500. Praise
I
God.
believe so. Yeah.
In fact, I'm going to check it right now. Let me
It
just
was
look.
actually AJ's idea. I don't want to be like Kent, grifting for money all the time. And AJ said, Cindi, that's ridiculous. People want to help you. And you obviously need a lawyer.
Okay, she's up to 400. Yeah, she's up to 440. And if you can get it up to 900 by Monday, this can move forward.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and
I want to
900
say
sounds
something, Sal, that's kind of important because yours is largely a Christian audience. I've been criticized for going to the atheists because I just mentioned AJ. First of all, I didn't go to the atheists. I didn't know who AJ was. Never heard of the guy. I didn't know Steve McRae. I didn't know any of the atheists. They came to me, first of all. Second of all, a friend of mine gave me a list of Christians that I could contact to get the word out. I contacted Christianity Today. I contacted Julie Royce. I contacted Mike Winger. I contacted Alan Parr. I contacted the head of the Baptists. I contacted everybody that I could in the Christian realm. They didn't even answer me. I had two of them say, I'm sorry, we can't help you with that. Most of them didn't even answer.
Yep.
So my heart was to go to the Christians. My heart wasn't even thinking about going to the atheists. They came to me, and the Lord has used this to build bridges. They talk about friendship evangelism. Well, mocking them every Wednesday on Whack an Atheist isn't building bridges. It's not friendship evangelism. It's not, they will know you are Christians by their love. But I tell you what, I have some new friends that are atheists, and the Lord is using it in a good way. And all of the channels that allowed me to speak, I was able to share the gospel. I was able to share my testimony. I was able to talk about my beliefs without being interrupted rudely. And even though they disagree, we simply agreed to disagree. It was a beautiful, beautiful thing.
Well, there is a passage, Acts 25:11. Paul says, "I appeal to Caesar." He's
Yeah.
appealing to a pagan leader when the religious leaders would not help him. Were actually the ones trying to throw him
Kill
in
him.
jail.
Mhm.
Yes. So what has happened is the Christian community is not cleaning up, is not taking care of their own at this
No,
point.
they're being spineless.
And this is what I've tried to say is, the world notices that.
Yes, they
The
do.
world notices that, and you drive people out of the church when you see that you turn a blind eye just because someone is an evangelist.
Yeah.
God does not, if you look at the book of Revelation, Jesus doesn't commend churches for how many people, converts they made. That is not the measure of righteousness. I
And
don't
it
know
is,
how this got in. Somehow in evangelical Christianity, the number of converts is now the measure of your righteousness. How much you've run your mouth is a measure of righteousness. Quote unquote, how many people have you witnessed to? That's not, you don't really see that in the New Testament.
the ultimate litmus test that the Lord would place on the Christian is love.
The love of God first, love of neighbor, and
If you
also,
have not love, you're just a clanging cymbal.
yes. So, but the other thing is, it's not as if the number of converts is a measure of how much you can get away with either. That's not how it works. I mean, that won't acquit Ravi Zacharias of all the crimes that he committed against women, including rape and all sorts of heinous other things.
Exactly.
And other Christians, ordinary Christians who are not in leadership, will see this and be disgusted. And the outside world, how are you going to persuade them that, like, oh, people get a free pass because the size of their congregation or their listening audience is a measure of their righteousness? That just does not fly.
And it's sad, the lack of discernment, that a
Yeah.
Christian could hear that and not notice that's not scriptural. It contains an element of truth because we are commanded to be evangelists and to share our faith. But and God does give grace for sin, but not sin that you refuse to turn from.
Yeah.
The price is repentance.
So, the bottom line is it should have never gotten this far, and people have been giving Kent Hovind a free pass. Not just people claiming to be Christians, people claiming to be creationists have been giving him a free pass. Finally, this summer, some people started to really come forward and say enough is enough, especially when Kent Hovind, in his own words, admitted he encouraged a registered sex offender to come to Dinosaur Adventureland.
And told all the godly Christian families that were volunteering at Dinosaur Adventureland who objected that they could leave. That if they didn't like how he runs the place, he's God's man, he's Moses, and if they didn't like it, they could go start their own ministry.
Okay.
That is his MO. That is not an exception. That's typical. And I think there's something besides just turning a blind eye. I think it's that they cannot believe that someone with such a strong evangelism background as Kent Hovind, that it couldn't be possible.
Yeah,
And
I'm
therefore
sorry.
they're going to turn on me as the messenger. I
Okay.
must be lying because it can't be true.
Okay, I have something very sad to say. Um, I did a show on the main channel about scam artists in the church. Sometimes the measure of quote unquote converts or the size of your congregation is really a measure of how good how good a con artist you are, not necessarily how many people you've turned to the Lord.
Yeah.
Con artist here in the case of it was Kratz and Grabinski. They had conned 11,000 people of almost $600 million. It's a lot of money. So let's not be doing this bean count and see how strong your ministry is because of how many people are following you. It could also be an indication how good a con artist you are.
Yeah.
And then it's too late. These people lost 11,000 people. Many of them lost their life savings because they were conned. And you know, so what I've seen is coming out of Kent Hovind are terrible creationist arguments, things that are embarrassing, things that aren't true, being peddled over and over again. It does not reflect well on Christianity nor on creationism. That his science is so bad that he's, you know, it's an embarrassment. If I wanted to get someone to represent, to be help Darwinism, it would be a Kent Hovind.
I actually am familiar with our enemies wish to put plants like Kent Hovind because they intentionally make Christianity look bad.
Exactly. That's why they would relish more. They would prefer to have more people like Kent Hovind on the opposing side than someone like James Tour.
Yeah.
Or Rob Stadler or John Sanford or many other names that are not well known, like Joe DeWeese. They'd rather have Kent Hovind because he's so bad at communicating the science and it's not even right.
And the spirit.
And the spirit, and then the personal issues. Goodness. And I'm just gonna, if people criticize me, and I'll say, okay, do you feel comfortable encouraging children to go to Dinosaur Adventureland? And I'm surprised they suddenly just start to shut up at that point. I'm like, oh, so you see the same problem too. You don't want it on your conscience. Maybe you're sending a kid to where there are registered sex offenders there, and sex offenders guilty of pedophilia. So,
or to a man who claims to be a Christian who enables these people, even if they're not there currently. Why is Kent Hovind not objecting to that behavior? Why is he saying, you're welcome here anytime, brother? In fact, I'm going to put you as vice president of the Creation Science Evangelism Board. And drug dealers and thieves, well, you can have the passwords and the bank accounts and run my finance section. If you don't see a problem with that, if you're not convinced, on my channel is every bit of evidence that I collected over 5 years of being there. There's over 30 witnesses. I'm not alone. I put everything that I had to prove, text messages, voice recordings, legal documents, arrest records, victim testimony. So I ain't making this up. visit my channel. There's different playlists that have, there's a section on pedophilia. There's a section on former employee people giving their experience there. I mean, I forget them all. There's a bunch of playlists. So,
Yes. Well, we're almost at 3.5 hours. So I'm glad. Thank you for sharing that. I mean, this is kind of a nasty stuff that we have to talk about.
yeah.
Family business. So we wish you well. I'm going to meet you backstage for a little bit afterward, if that's okay, Cindi.
Yeah.
I have a little energy for that. But what I would like to do is have you pray first, and then I'm going to play the closing credits briefly. And after the closing credits, we can meet backstage. I'll end the stream. So go ahead and why don't you close us out in prayer?
Okay. And don't forget to Google on YouTube the song I Stand in Awe of You. Okay, Heavenly Father, we're trying to find ways to help unbelievers and believers see your glory, and that their faith would be unshakable. And we just ask, well, not just that you would help us communicate better, but that you would go before us and work in the hearts of men, because without your Holy Spirit, they will remain blind and spiritually dead, is my understanding of the scriptures. So we ask, please, Lord, send your Holy Spirit. It's not your will that any should perish, but all should come to repentance. And your Holy Spirit is what convicts the world of sin and righteousness. And Lord, I do ask for justice on Tuesday, or whenever the final hearing is, if he grants a hearing, if he decides to hear this case, and help me deal with it if justice does not prevail. Your will be done, Lord. Your will be done. Use this in whatever way you see fit. We do pray for the church, Lord, that is undiscerning and unwilling to be involved or condemn someone they think has done great things. We just pray for the body of Christ to be what you want us to be. We thank you, Lord. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. And I'm now going to play the closing credits. I'll meet you backstage after the closing credits, Cindi.
God
Take care, everyone.
bless. Good night.